Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Marvel. My girlfriend saves the world, and I am responsible for dating. Chapter 21. Another morning, Shinian put on outdoor winter clothes and went to school. This was also the last day of school this week. The day after tomorrow is the annual Christmas. Starting tomorrow, high schools in the United States will have a holiday. It will be a full week-long holiday. Passing by the intersection, I didn't run into Gwen as usual, and I didn't know if she would continue to call in sick today. However, when passing the intersection next to the community, a small orange beast jumped out from the lawn of the park, suddenly frightening Xinyan. Perhaps starting from the night before yesterday, I opened the door to the extraordinary and frequently came into contact with extraordinary things. With one foot on the threshold behind the world, Xinyan is physically and mentally tired. His worldview continues to refresh, and he is not quite used to it yet, tightening his spirit and heartstrings. Xinyan glanced over cautiously and saw a kitten squatting on the ground. It was about 1 or 2 years old, with a slightly thin body and orange hair that showed its breed. It's just a little orange cat. Xinyan breathed a sigh of relief and couldn't help but smile bitterly. I have been really nervous recently. The world is so big, how can I encounter the extraordinary so easily? What, are you hungry? Seeing that the kitten had no name tag on its neck and looked dirty and pitiful, Xinyan knew that it was probably a wild cat abandoned in the park. After thinking about it, Xinyan ran to a convenience store not far away, bought 3 ham sausages and turned back. Seeing the two-legged beast Xinyan approaching, the little orange cat quickly hid in the grass, revealing a pair of green vertical pupils, full of deep vigilance. This is edible, you see. Xinyan opened the package in front of it, happily ate one of the ham sausages, and placed the remaining 2 ham sausages on the ground in front of the grass. Class time was approaching, so Xinyan did not stay too long. After he walked out of the park, he looked back and saw the grass in the distance swaying violently, and the ham on the ground had disappeared. Xinyan smiled knowingly and continued to rush to school. Among the grass, the pair of green vertical eyes watched Xinyan go away. The kitten licked its paws. The little cat belly did not show any signs of swelling. As for the 2 ham sausages just now, including the packaging bag, there was no trace at all. The school gate. Xinyan ran into Gwen, who had also just arrived at school. The two were obviously startled when they saw each other. Gwen, are you feeling better about your cold? Xinyan stepped forward to say hello. Result. Gwen suddenly puffed up her cheeks and walked into the school quickly as if she didn't see him on purpose. Xinyan was confused. What's going on? The girl's thoughts are really difficult to fathom. Xinyan shook his head, confused, and simply stopped thinking about it. However, we still have to chase. Xinyan quickened his pace and caught up. However, the faster he chased, the faster Gwen ran in front. The two ran into the teaching building one after the other. At this time, a girl stopped Xinyan in the corridor. Senior, please stop for a moment. Xinyan raised his eyes and saw a junior female student about 15 years old. The other party's long blonde hair was tied into an old-fashioned single ponytail, with many strands of hair messily placed on his forehead and face. In addition, he was wearing a pair of thick black glasses with short-sighted rims, and he always lowered his head and did not dare to look directly at the person. It makes her look like a nerd, a transparent person in school, or the best target among girls of the same age to be bullied and ridiculed. Xinyan had no special impression of this female classmate. Out of politeness, he asked gently, "This classmate, what can I do for you?" The girl hesitated, bit her lip, and plucked up the courage to say, "Senior, my name is Kara Danvers. We have met at the opening party." I remember. Xinyan suddenly realized that he remembered that at the opening party, this female classmate stayed alone in a deserted corner outside the crowd. Perhaps he was remembering some of his experiences before meeting Gwen when he was a child, which made him unbearable. I received this classmate before and explained to her some of the school's measures and rules. However, that was almost half a year ago. You still remember me? The girl's eyes suddenly lit up. Her head raised slightly, and she stared closely at Xinyan in front of her. She, who was still hesitant at first, seemed to have finally made up her mind. I don't know if it was because her spider sense was too sharp or because she was a woman's sixth sense. Gwen, who stopped in front of the corridor, saw this scene and suddenly felt an ominous premonition in her heart. She wanted to step forward and interrupt Kara's next words. But as if she anticipated what Gwen wanted to interrupt, Kara secretly clenched her fists and spoke in a faster tone. Senior, I like you, please date me. Her voice was not loud but not quiet either. It could almost be heard throughout the corridor. Xinyan opened his mouth wide. Gwen's beautiful eyes, which were a step too late, shrank violently. A few seconds later, the students in the corridor were in an uproar. Youth is great. The teacher passing by turned a blind eye, shook his head and commented with emotion. Ring ring ring. The bell rang for the end of get out of class. There was a burst of noise on the huge high school campus, and a large number of students poured out of the teaching building. Apart from some conversation classes and lunch, most of them were still discussing the silver-haired goddess and the morning campus confession incident. Childhood sweetheart vs. a girl from heaven. Popularity ranking number 1 vs. popularity ranking number 1. This will definitely be on the campus news weekly. But fortunately, there will be a week-long holiday after today. As the protagonist of this incident, Xinyan packed up his things and walked out of the school gate early. Behind him, Gwen, carrying a school bag in one hand, kicked her boots and chased after him. She even forgot about her previous embarrassment. Gwen asked angrily, Xinyan, you won't really agree to the confession of a girl you met for the first time, right? It's not the first time we met. Xinyan corrected. It's the second time we met. The second time, this is too exaggerated. Gwen was immediately anxious. Don't worry, I didn't agree to her. But you didn't refuse either. That's because. Xinyan paused and looked at Gwen seriously. You know what? Confessing in public means she has enough courage. As for me, I haven't figured out how to respond to her courage and determination. Xinyan said here, apologetically, I'm sorry, Gwen, I accidentally involved you. This matter has nothing to do with you. Gwen stared blankly at Xinyan's back as he continued to walk forward. Her soft and rosy lower lip had been bitten by her pearly teeth at some point. No, it doesn't matter. Gwen said in her heart. The setting sun was about to sink into the city, and with the dusk, the sky began to snow again. Xinyan returned home, and when he passed the park, he deliberately looked at the lawn. The kitten that was lying in the park in the morning had gone somewhere. It's winter, I wish you good luck, poor little guy. Xinyan exhaled, touched the ham sausage in his pocket, and walked away wrapped in the jacket on his body. However, when Xinyan returned to the downstairs of his residential building and looked at the open elevator door, a bold horizontal line appeared above his head. Why are you here? Xinyan had a black question mark on his face. In the elevator of the resident, a small orange cat was curled up in the corner, and it was unknown how long it had been lying there. After Xinyan appeared at the elevator entrance, the little orange cat yawned as if he had sensed something, rubbed his sleepy eyes with his paws, and showed a harmless expression. Xinyan was a little dumbfounded. How did this cat know that his family lived here? No, this was probably just a coincidence. Xinyan pretended not to see it, walked into the elevator and pressed the floor where he lived. During this time, many residents also entered the elevator. In order to prevent the kitten from being stepped on by others, Xinyan chose to stand in front of it. The elevator began to go up, and pedestrians came in and out. During this time, Xinyan took a peek at the kitten lying on the ground behind him. Well behaved, no movement. Until he arrived at the 16th floor where he lived. Xinyan hadn't moved yet. The little orange cat who was squatting in the corner and had already woken up suddenly got up first, took a step and passed through the gap between his feet and walked out of the elevator. No way. Xinyan's mouth twitched slightly, walked out of the elevator, and looked at the kitten squatting quietly at the door of his house. What's the matter with this cat? I'm back. Inside the house, Diana was stunned when she saw Xinyan coming in with the kitten. She asked curiously, did you pick it up? Aunt, I want to ask you first. Could it be that you picked it up? Xinyan asked weakly. No, Diana shook her head bluntly. In all these years, I have picked up you once, and I have never picked up anything else. That's true. Xinyan scratched his head, looked at the little orange cat that came into the house with a familiar look, and hesitated. Aunt, can we adopt it? Since it was here, and it was a cold winter outside, he really couldn't bear to drive it out again. I have no objection. Diana nodded and said, but you have to be prepared to take care of it in the future. Of course. In fact, I wanted to raise a cat a long time ago. Xinyan smiled and picked up the little orange cat, and said without thinking, then you will be called, Little Emperor, in the future. The little orange cat blinked, not understanding the perfunctory nature of this name. Aunt Diana was a wife, smiling and urging, let's take a shower first, we'll have dinner later. Okay, let's take a shower together, Xiao Huang. Xinyan changed his mind and simply carried the little orange cat into the bathroom. In the bathtub filled with warm water. The little orange cat was not afraid of water, which was rare. It lay on the edge of the bathtub blankly. Xinyan, who was still naked, rubbed the shower gel on its light orange fur. Soon, its body was covered with white foam. Wash the cat's belly. Xinyan turned the little orange cat's body over, rubbed the soft white fur on its lower abdomen, and couldn't help muttering, Xiao Huang, you are a female. Meow. The kitten, who had been squinting, was inexplicably angry, and violently lowered his head to bite Xinyan's finger. The slightly sharp little tiger teeth pierced the skin, and a drop of blood fell on the floor of the bathroom. Xiao Huang. Xinyan cried out in pain and quickly retracted his finger. As if knowing that he had done something wrong, the little orange cat looked at Xinyan's bleeding finger and showed a trace of grievance in a humane way. Okay, it's not your fault. Be careful next time and don't bite people casually. Xinyan comforted and taught it. Looking at the hand that was bleeding and stained with cat saliva, he was about to clean it with clean water, but his body suddenly shook. Wait, this feeling is... Xinyan opened his eyes in shock, and a familiar yet unfamiliar abnormal feeling swept over him. His brown pupils as an ordinary human suddenly turned to the dark vertical pupils with cold light. The Lord of the Dependents, launched. Xinyan. Hearing Xinyan's cry from the bathroom, Diana quickly opened the door of the bathroom. Almost the next moment the door opened. A hideous tentacle covered with barbs, like a spear, rushed straight to her face. Diana quickly moved away and looked into the bathroom along the tentacles. She could see Xinyan standing naked in the bathtub. From behind him, several hideous, violent, twisting and stretching tentacles grew out, and the edges of the tentacles were full of sharp little teeth-like barbs. In the corner of the bathroom, the kitten squatting on the ground looked at Xinyan with strange and terrifying tentacles, and his eyes lit up. What happened? Diana was in doubt. I don't know much either. Xiao Huang bit me and my body is like this. Xinyan smiled bitterly, looking at the tentacles that stretched out from his back and shook wildly. Is it the blood and saliva that acted as liquid media that triggered the ability of the Lord of the Dependents? Diana looked at the blood on the ground and the little orange cat, and was still very surprised. How could a cat do that? Whoosh! The tentacle suddenly turned back instinctively, biting Diana's back like a blood plate. Diana was startled, and felt the terrifying suction force of a small black hole erupting behind her. She struggled hard and her body escaped the attraction of the black hole of the tentacles. However, her clothes were still torn apart in an instant, revealing a perfect body that was like a jade carving. More than one tentacle, another 7 or 8 tentacles were also twisting and twitching crazily, swallowing towels, shower gel, mirrors, and water in the bathtub at a speed visible to the naked eye. In less than half a second, everything in the shower room was wiped out. The little orange cat jumped into Xinyan's arms in time and escaped. One of the tentacles wrapped around Diana's slender and flexible waist, and Xinyan could clearly feel the wonderful touch coming from the tip of her tongue. Wait, why the tip of the tongue? Use one hand to hold the tentacle tightly to prevent it from being swallowed by the black hole of the tentacle. Diana didn't dare to pull hard to avoid hurting Xinyan. She thought about it and made a quick judgment. If this is the cat's ability, then now it should also be your own ability. Xinyan, try go control it. I'm working hard. Xinyan gritted his teeth and closed his eyes. In the darkness, the senses brought by the tentacles are more real and delicate. Soon, the tentacles extending from his back gradually calmed down, and the tentacles wrapped around Diana's waist slowly loosened up. On the dining table, the little orange cat, completely unaware of the disaster he had caused, was happily eating his share of meat, and his eating behavior was no different from that of an ordinary kitten. Xinyan, who was sitting on a chair nearby, was only wearing pants and had his upper body naked. Diana, who had changed into a new set of home clothes, stood behind him and asked softly, "How do you feel now?" "I feel like I want to eat it all," Xinyan said to the food on the table in front of him. Then eat it. Diana took a few steps back. Xinyan took a deep breath, and then the skin on his back suddenly split open, like a hideous bloody mouth, with 8 tentacles twisting and growing. They rushed to the dining table in front of them, not to mention the food, but also the plates, knives and forks, tablecloths, etc., all devoured together. Everything was done in just 1 second. Xinyan, who retracted his tentacles, was no different from a normal person, with only his pupils flashing a soul-devouring green cold light. How is it? Diana's slender white fingers slid across Xinyan's back skin and continued to ask. I don't feel anything. Xinyan touched his stomach. All the things that the tentacle swallowed just now didn't go into my stomach. That should be right. Diana nodded and looked at the little orange cat eating happily. It's a Yuan devourer. Yuan devourer. Xinyan blinked. That's right. This is a species from outer space. My mother once mentioned it, but I don't know much about it. I only know that the devourer is the appearance of a cat on our Earth, but it has a very terrible ability to swallow a large amount of things into the dimension unique to its race. This species is very dangerous. Diana squinted her eyes and pondered. I don't know why this outer space species appeared on Earth. Really, I don't think the little emperor is as dangerous as I imagined. Xinyan recalled. If it is really dangerous, it would have used the devourer ability to devour me as early as the first time I met it by the park. Besides, just now in the bathroom, it just bit me like an ordinary cat, and it also didn't use the devourer ability. Diana said, do you choose to keep it? Xinyan looked at the little orange cat on the ground. Since it is an alien species, isn't it more dangerous to leave it outside? If it stays with us, we can at least stop and teach it. That's right. Diana agreed with his point of view. She also thought of one more thing. If the devouring beast really has a good impression of Xinyan, or even relies on him, then he can protect Xinyan closely in the future, or act as a starting medium to provide abilities. So what are you going to do tonight? Can you completely control the tentacles? Diana asked a question. Probably. No. Xinyan spread his hands. As long as I get close to something, the tentacles will instinctively want to devour it, just like people are used to breathing. This instinct of devouring is not so easy to control. Just like he got the demigod ability of his aunt before. These powers and abilities are not innate to Xinyan, but suddenly acquired, so the ability cannot be switched on and off at will. I don't know if it will end in 4 hours. Xinyan was a little unsure. This time, it was not the indirect triggering ability last time, but a direct liquid exchange with the devouring beast. If it lasts all night, then he can't think of sleeping. Lying on the bed, maybe the next second, the bed will be swallowed by itself and exiled to an unknown dimension. Who can stand this? I have a way, Diana said suddenly. Next to Xinyan's room, the room here is full of the unique violet scent. Xinyan lay on the ice blue duvet, his upper body still naked, but with a faint golden light. The golden lasso bound Xinyan's body, including his arms, and wrapped around his entire upper body. Diana, who changed into a suspender nightgown, leaned on the bed next to her, flipping through the archaeology books under the dim light of the bedside lamp. I say, Aunt, is this the way you are dealing with it? Xinyan, who was unable to move, had a headache for a while. Yeah, Diana responded softly and continued to look at the archaeology books. Seal your second mouth, and the tentacles will not be able to escape. Xinyan was speechless. He understood the reason. However, this scene, why is it a bit like bondage play? Go to sleep quickly, Diana said. Okay. Xinyan closed his eyes, but his attention was still attracted by his aunt next to him. It's been a long time since I slept with my aunt. So cozy, no wonder. Under the dim and warm light, my aunt was only wearing a thin suspender nightgown, her graceful curves were clearly visible, and her 2 slender white legs were crossed together. Who is this? Can she sleep? Xinyan twisted his body uneasily, and his face suddenly froze, but in addition to his back, there was another tentacle on his body that reacted instinctively. What's wrong? Diana was still turning the pages of the book. Nothing. Xinyan was about to make excuses, but as soon as he opened his mouth, the words changed back. Aunt, you are so beautiful, I'm XX there. In an instant, the air in the room suddenly became silent. Diana's hand stopped flipping the book, and her stunning face froze slightly. Xinyan's mind was even more blank. He was stupid. Stupid. What did he say just now? What I would never say to my aunt, just blurted out like that. You. Diana blushed slightly and said, don't mind. You are bound by the lasso of truth. Anyone who is bound by it will reveal their truth when asked. Oh, is that so? Xinyan laughed and wanted to crawl under the bed. Don't mind. How can I not mind? How was your day at school? Diana deliberately changed the subject. Xinyan, bound by the lasso of truth, said bluntly, nothing happened. Gwen got angry for some reason. Also, a girl in the lower grade, named Kara, confessed to me in public. Suddenly, there was a subtle silence in the room again. Diana didn't know what she was thinking. She was silent for a moment, and then asked softly, so, do you like that girl? Xinyan continued to reveal the truth without hesitation. I have only met her twice, and I can't say whether I like her or not. However, I have a good feeling and impression of her. You are indeed at the age of falling in love. Diana closed the archaeology book and smiled slightly. If you think a girl is good, you must take the initiative to seize the opportunity. Xinyan suddenly said, I think my aunt is very good. Diana's body trembled slightly. She put down the archaeology book in her hand, reached out to turn off the bedside lamp, and said calmly in the dark, go to bed early. Xinyan did not speak again. Is the last sentence a truth that was forced to be spoken under the power of the truth lasso? Is it a word that can only be spoken after ignoring taboos, common sense, and ignoring the relationship between each other? He didn't know. Xinyan only knew that that was the word he wanted to convey most at this time. Morning, 7:30. Xinyan stood in front of the mirror and watched his pupils transform from cat-like vertical pupils back to the brown color of ordinary humans. Xinyan tried to hold a new piece of soap in his hand, but it didn't get swallowed by the tentacles like last night. The ability to eat elements has disappeared. Xinyan breathed a sigh of relief, but it was precisely because of this accident that he had a better understanding of his ability, the master of the family. 12 hours. If you directly exchange liquid with the opposite gender, Xinyan will be able to possess the other person's abilities for half a day. Compared with the previous 4 hours, there is a threefold difference in lasting effect. The sleepy-eyed yuan-eating beast cub Xiaohuang looked at Xinyan in front of the mirror with a strange expression. In its unique senses, Xinyan, who had become a fellow race, changed back again, which was a bit disappointing. If I take another bite, will I be able to transform back into my own race? Xiaohuang was eager to try. As if he saw its intention, Xinyan reminded him seriously, Xiaohuang, don't bite me casually anymore. Otherwise, you will not be allowed to eat for a day. Meow. Xiaohuang, who looked like a little orange cat, suddenly drooped his ears and swayed his tail, looking listless. My aunt went out. Xinyan was bored, but also half lying on the sofa in the living room with some pleasure. Too many things happened these days, but he still liked such a relaxed and normal ordinary life. Whoever loves to save the world, he is not a superhero anyway. Xinyan lay down for a while, then picked up his phone and checked Facebook. I don't know if I don't swipe it, but if I swipe it. Not to mention being shocked, the Xinyan people were immediately dumbfounded. He had thought that the discussions and topics would gradually die down within a day or two. Unexpectedly, the incident in the Washington theater in the past 2 days has been escalating on the internet. Related and targeted news reports have been overwhelming, and it has reached an astonishing level of public discussion. Many people even changed the live video of him fighting in cross-dressing, which basically showed his back, and the screenshots were changed into various avatars, covers, or emoticons. Xinyan held his breath and looked at it for a long time before spitting out, I'll go. The only thing worthy of a fluke was that Xinyan did not reveal his true identity that night. He had also seen the on-site shooting videos circulated on the internet and in news reports. They were either too far away and blurred, or they only captured his face. Back view. No one knows that the silver-haired goddess, the new superhero who slays the abominations of monsters, is actually an ordinary Chinese middle school student, male. The only ones who know the truth are Aunt Diana, Spider-Woman, and the dead abomination. But, seeing photos of herself in women's clothing flooding every corner of the internet, Xinyan's toes almost dug a hole in the sofa. What is a large social death scene? That's it. Xinyan quickly opened Twitter, which is commonly used for online communication. When he saw on Twitter that his classmates almost always posted posts such as, "I want to be the sword held by the silver-haired goddess," and publicly announced that I am a fan of the silver-haired goddess, his last chance of luck was completely shattered. Also, what the hell is the classmate's phrase, "I want to be stepped on by her"? Well, a male teacher in the class silently replaced Xinyan's photo of women's clothing with his own Twitter avatar to express his admiration. The corners of Xinyan's mouth twitched. It's hopeless, this world is hopeless. Start thinking about destroying the world or living on another planet. Xinyan looked helpless. At this time, a private message suddenly came over Twitter. Xinyan slumped on the sofa and opened the book weakly. Gwen, what are you doing? Xinyan, I am autistic. Gwen, she quickly sent a second message. Okay, I'm not angry with you anymore. Xinyan was speechless for a while. He still didn't know why the other party was angry this morning. Gwen, but you have to promise me something. Xinyan, what's the matter? Come with me to New York. New York, Xinyan was stunned. The two cities of Washington and New York are not very far apart. The straight line distance is only 300 to 400 kilometers. With very convenient transportation such as trains and buses, it can be reached in 3 hours at the fastest. But after all, they are different cities. Even if you go shopping, you can't go that far, right? Xinyan, want to go shopping? Gwen, of course not. Have you forgotten? At the end of our semester, that is, in January next year, the class will organize a group outing. The instructor of the class has set the tourist city in New York. I, as the squad leader, I want to take advantage of the current holiday to go there and plan the route. For fear of Xinyan's rejection, Gwen quickly added, you also know that it is not very safe for a girl to go out alone. Okay, Xinyan agreed. Gwen, that's today. Let's meet at the train station at 10 o'clock. Go early and come back early. Today, Xinyan frowned. He originally thought that Gwen would go after Christmas, but he didn't expect that it would be before Christmas. But yes, Christmas Day and the next few days are all days for family gatherings, and it is not easy to travel far. Think of this. Xinyan was about to get up from the sofa and make preparations for the trip, when another private message was sent on Twitter. This time, it wasn't Gwen's. Kara, Senior, good morning. It's the new school girl added yesterday, Kara Danvers. Good morning, Xinyan replied. Sorry, I forgot to reply to you yesterday. I thought about it carefully. You are a very good girl, but I have no experience in falling in love or dating, so I can't agree to it. Confession. Wow, the good guy card has been issued. Xinyan breathed a sigh of relief, but before he put down the phone in his hand, another message came from the other side. Then let's try to go on a date. Dating. Xinyan didn't react. Before he could reply, Kara's messages continued to arrive on Twitter. How was today? Train station. Xinyan has a big head. In front of him, two girls stood opposite each other, naturally Gwen and Kara. Today, Gwen is still wearing her usual beige jeans, black soled boots, and a fitted hooded jacket. Under the brilliant short golden hair, she looks capable and has a coolness that is rare for girls. To use the words commonly used by students in school to evaluate her, she has the A-level royal sister type. As for Kara, when they saw it for the first time, both Xinyan and Gwen almost couldn't recognize it. Today, Kara did not wear her usual black-rimmed glasses, nor did she tie up her hair. Her slightly curly dark blonde hair fell down to her shoulders and lower back. When she raised her head slightly, she revealed a youthful and sweet girl's face. She has a pair of white canvas shoes on her feet. Although she is still wearing an ordinary jacket and trousers without any extra decoration, she is still a very young, beautiful and sweet girl despite her natural beauty. Two beautiful girls with different styles standing together immediately attracted the attention of many passengers at the station. However, when they saw the young man standing between the two girls, all the passengers soon showed expressions of sadness and anger with the same hatred. What a sin! The train slowly pulled out of the platform and headed towards New York. Gwen and Kara, who were sitting one seat apart, looked at each other with a hint of hostility in their eyes. Xinyan, who was sitting between them, was completely unaware of this. He put his school bag on his knees, and as the zipper of the school bag was slightly opened, a small orange head poked out from it. Kitten. Seeing this, Gwen couldn't help but wonder. Xinyan, when did you raise a kitten, and it's an orange cat? It's called Xiao Huang. I picked it up in the park yesterday. My aunt went out, and I thought it would be better to take it with me. Xinyan gently massaged the soft chin of the little orange cat with the belly of his thumb, and Xiao Huang also showed a comfortable and enjoyable expression at the right time. I wanted to adopt a kitten before. Gwen's beautiful eyes sparkled, and she felt it was extremely novel. After all, who can resist cuteness? Kara, who was next to him, had a strange look in her blue eyes from the moment she saw Xiao Huang. Let me hold it for a while, Gwen said, stretching her hand towards the little orange cat. However, before her hand touched Xiao Huang's body, the little orange cat's hair immediately exploded and quickly shrank back into Xinian's school bag. Through the darkness that could be seen through the zipper of the school bag, a pair of strange vertical pupils of the animal glowed with a faint green light. Gwen was shocked, and her hand subconsciously shrank back at the same time, and the tiny hairs on her body also exploded like the instinct of a beast. Obviously, both the man and the beast were surprised. As an ordinary person, Xinian naturally did not notice Gwen's abnormality. What are you afraid of? She is my friend. While teaching Xiao Huang, Xinian smiled at Gwen. Don't worry, Gwen. This little guy is very defensive. Now, except for me, it won't even let my aunt touch it. It's okay, I'm fine. Gwen shook her head, and her eyes couldn't help staring at Xinian's school bag, with deep fear and surprise in her eyes. The spider sensed very clearly that at that moment, he had the illusion that he was about to be eaten. Is it really an illusion? Okay, I'll take Xiao Huang to the train's toilet to drink some water. He will become a little impatient when he is thirsty. Xinyan left his seat with his school bag. Watching Xinyan's back entering the train's restroom, Gwen's attention immediately shifted from the little orange cat to the schoolmate sitting quietly beside him. Tell me, what is your purpose? Senior sister, what is your purpose? The bright sunlight outside fell into the carriage from the windowsill. Kara's originally dark golden hair turned white and gold. She asked curiously like a fresh and lovely girl next door, I want to date Senior Xinyan. Can this be said to be a purpose? Shameless. Gwen's cheeks flushed slightly, and shame flashed across her. Then she lowered her voice and said, you can deceive others, but you can't deceive me. You clearly. Senior sister Gwen. Kara narrowed her eyes slightly and said naturally, you are not an ordinary person, right? So what? Since the other party has already revealed his cards, Gwen also admitted it very straightforwardly. When Gwen saw Kara at school for the first time, an unprecedented sense of crisis surged in her heart. This sense of crisis is not from the so-called rival psychology, but from a deeper level. It makes her body and mind tremble more than facing a huge and powerful hatred. No matter what your purpose is, you can come to me in private. Xinian is just an ordinary person. Gwen quietly clenched her fists and faced Kara, ready to fight at any time. Kara just stroked her hair lightly, and said seriously, Senior sister, my view on mate selection is very normal, and I have no personal interest in you. As for Senior Xinian, since you, who are not ordinary people, can be friends with him, why can't I be his future lover? Seems reasonable. Gwen raised her eyebrows lightly, realizing that Kara was not easy to mess with, but the other party really did not seem to have the intention of hurting Xinian. Recalling what happened just now, Gwen said, what do you think of the cat just now? That's not an ordinary cat. Kara said solemnly, no. It should be said that it just has a similar appearance to a cat. In fact, whether it is internal or race, it has nothing to do with cats on Earth. Kara slightly supported one of her cheeks and thought, this is also the first time I have seen this kind of creature. The structure of its bones and internal organs is very different, like a small movable black hole. Ah, isn't it dangerous for Xinyan to be alone with it? Gwen immediately stood up and looked worriedly at the train toilet where there was no movement. Don't worry, senior sister. Kara blinked and said to a metal cover in the toilet, I have been watching since just now. The creature is very well behaved with the senior, and it is no different from an ordinary kitten. You can see through. Gwen looked back at Kara in shock, remembering the other party's analysis and judgment of the kitten just now. If he couldn't see through, how could he know the situation inside the kitten? I am not an ordinary person, so I should be seen through by the other party in this way. Of course. Kara nodded as a matter of course and pointed to the bathroom, Look, Senior Xinyan is in there now. Close your eyes. Stop looking. Gwen's face flushed, and she blocked Kara's eyes with her hands to stop her from peeking in the direction of the bathroom. Kara subconsciously raised her hand and gently pushed Gwen away from her. But with a bang, Gwen hit the back of the seat opposite with a look of shock on her face. Where did that slender and fair little arm get such terrible strength? Kara panicked this time and apologized quickly. I'm sorry, senior sister, I didn't control the strength well. I can only say, fortunately, the target was me. Gwen exhaled, patted the dust on her clothes on her back, and stood up again without any problem. After a while, Xinyan returned to his seat with a school bag containing the little orange cat, and looked at Gwen and Kara in surprise as they were playing together. These two beautiful girls seemed to get along better than expected. Seeing Xinyan coming back, Gwen and Kara quickly returned to normal. They sat in their seats calmly, as if nothing had happened, and returned to their cold and arrogant appearances as a queen and a girl next door. Xinyan was confused. Wait, why is there a dent in the back of the chair in front of him? No matter what, the train continued to move forward at a constant speed, getting closer and closer to its destination, New York. In the United States, New York is world famous as the economic capital. There are row upon row of high-rise buildings and LED billboards are dazzling. Today is another peaceful day. How strange. In the bustling downtown streets, police sirens with local characteristics will sound every half hour, and there is a warm atmosphere of freedom everywhere. In fact, since Tony Stark publicly revealed his identity as Iron Man more than a year ago, New York, where Stark Industries headquarters is stationed, has become much more stable. After all, before criminals commit crimes here, they are not sure whether the playboy worth hundreds of billions will suddenly put on his cool steel suit and fall from the sky at a speed of Mach 1 to blast them into the sky to meet God. Although everyone knows that Tony Stark rarely takes action to punish small crimes, such as bank robbery, but the desperate lack of strength that once encountered, there will be no chance of escape, still makes many criminal gangs I was frightened. It is in line with the current advertising slogan, in 2009, technology makes the world a better place. Iron Man is the king sealed with cross-generational technology. His huge deterrent effect as a superhero is, to some extent, more powerful than that of a city police officer. At this moment, Tony Stark, who has titles such as Iron Man, Playboy, Billionaire, etc., is in a famous nightclub in New York, surrounded by a group of dancers and models with bulging figures and very few clothes. I'm telling you, Tony, could you please not make appointments at places like this every time we talk about business? His friend and U.S. Army Colonel James Lord was speechless. He was trying to get through the crowd of women and get next to Tony Stark. The dignified and neat officer uniform on his body was incompatible with the current environment. But the title of colonel was still enough to intimidate many people. After Rhodes arrived, the women dispersed from Stark, who was attracting bees and butterflies. It's impossible to change the place. It's impossible to change in this life. But can you please stop wearing these clothes every time? It will affect the atmosphere and mood. Stark joked, picking up a glass of red wine and swaying it. I just snuck out from the base. Having said that, Rhodes also took a glass of red wine from the passing bartender's tray and toasted with Stark. The lights are bright and the sound is booming. After drinking, Rhodes looked intoxicated and quickly integrated into the present moment. What do you want to do with me suddenly at this noon? Stark asked casually. By the way, I almost forgot about the real thing. Rhodes trembled, looked at his friend seriously, and lowered his voice. In the past 6 months, haven't you been looking for people with extraordinary talents or incredible powers? That's true. Stark nodded calmly. He did not hide his desire to create a superhero team from his friends. If Rhodes didn't have a military status and it was inconvenient to act privately in many cases, the other party must be one of them. How's the progress? Rhodes asked curiously. It's not bad. There are already 2 or 3 candidates. Although Stark's tone was still very casual, Rhodes could hear his helplessness. In fact, Stark only found 1 candidate, and he just found it in the past few days. There were 2 others proposed by the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Fortunately, the person he found was not comparable to ordinary people in terms of brains or strength. This is the only thing that makes Stark feel relieved. Even though the world is so big, there are still very few humans with strength beyond ordinary people. What do you think of the new superhero in Washington, the silver-haired goddess? She defeated the hatred of the Hulk clone. Rhodes asked with interest. Of course, I asked Jax to check it out that night. Stark spread his hands and narrowed his eyes and said, although there is not much information, I can confirm that she lives in Washington. The streets of Times Square are crowded with people everywhere, Christmas tree decorations can be seen everywhere, and the lively festive atmosphere has enveloped the entire city. Sheenian, what do you think of this? Gwen asked, wearing a Santa Claus hat and pulling Sheenian's sleeve. Sheenian, it looks good. Senior, where is this one of mine? Kara touched the reindeer bell she wore around her neck, and the bell made a clear and pleasant metallic sound. Sheenian, it looks good. Throughout the whole process, Gwen and Kara were wandering around the bustling commercial streets with their toolman Sheenian. The two beautiful girls also became a beautiful scenery in the urban area. Although it was a nice experience to be surrounded by beautiful girls, Sheenian did not forget about business. When they reached the intersection, Sheenian suggested, okay, now I'll take this side of the street, and you two will go that way. Gwen's smile disappeared. Why? Kara also had a question mark on her face. Gwen, have you forgotten? You came here in advance to do tourism research. Sheenian gestured. The street is so big, you can't finish it no matter how much you walk around. Why don't we divide our troops into two groups, and one person walks on one side? Together with Kara, you can stay safe. Gwen's mind suddenly went blank, and she never thought that the reason she had found earlier had deceived her. Senior, Kara raised her eyes and was about to say something, but she met Sheenian's smile. Then it's up to you, Kara. You and Gwen, take care of each other's safety. Kara opened her mouth and wanted to say something. You are the most unsafe, right? She couldn't say no, so she could only agree helplessly, okay. That's settled. Sheenian walked alone towards a street with his school bag. Gwen and Kara, who were left standing, looked at each other in bewilderment. How could things turn out like this? Sheenian took his phone and took photos while walking in one direction of the street. He didn't know how long he walked until a building attracted him. It was a memorial hall. From time to time, adult tourists came in and out with their children. Some children held plastic 5-star round shields in their hands, their eyes full of excitement and longing. Seeing this distinctive scene, you don't need to ask what kind of memorial hall this is. Captain America Memorial Hall. As the first superhero created in human history, Captain America's influence in this country is unquestionable, even though he has been dead for more than half a century. But in the military, there are still many American soldiers who regard him as a benchmark idol for soldiers. Sheenian had only heard about it before, but now was the first time he saw the Captain America Memorial. This is a landmark for New York tourists. Sheenian stood in front of the entrance stairs of the memorial, hesitating whether to go in for a tour, when a tall young man walked out from inside. The white young man was wearing casual pants and a jacket, and a peaked cap with a very low brim. He lowered his head slightly so that his face could not be seen clearly. However, Sheenian stood at the bottom of the stairs, from an upward angle that just allowed him to see his appearance clearly. Mr. Steve, Sheenian said in surprise. The white young man was stunned for a moment, looked at the boy in front of him, and nodded slightly. The person who secretly walked out of the memorial at that moment was the person commemorated by the memorial, Captain America, Steve Rogers. New York Park. A thin layer of transparent ice floats on the surface of the central lake, glittering in the sun. On the wooden chairs by the lake, a white youth and a Chinese teenager sit side by side. Captain America Steve Rogers looked at Sheenian with a teasing tone. Thank you for not shouting loudly just now, otherwise you might be blocked by people and watched again. That's not what I want to see either. I don't like to attract too much attention. Sheenian shrugged, and then asked curiously, Captain, you are not dead yet. Just dug out of the ice in the Arctic Ocean not long ago. Steve spread his hands. Maybe Steve and Sheenian didn't think the other was special, so they talked and chatted tacitly and naturally. You just said that you don't like to attract too much attention. Steve sighed. In my era, everyone wanted others to focus their attention on themselves. Have the young people of this generation changed? Times have changed, Captain. Sheenian wanted to complain about this, but finally changed it too. In fact, the intensity of people's pursuit of attention is definitely more exaggerated than your era. I don't want to attract attention. It's just because I prefer a peaceful and calm daily life. After hearing what Sheenian said, Steve's young and handsome face was obviously stunned for a moment. Captain, I personally want to ask you a question. Sheenian asked curiously. If you are given another chance, do you want to be an ordinary person or a superhero? Steve paused, as if he was stumped by Sheenian's question. After a moment, Steve whispered, I think, after being a hero, I will be an ordinary person. Unfortunately, everything is too late now. He obviously looks like a young man in his early 20s, but now, the helplessness and loneliness on his face are like a centenarian. However, it seems that there is nothing wrong with saying, centenarian. Sheenian vaguely understood what Steve wanted to express. As a superhero, it is mostly for this world, and as an ordinary person, it must be for someone. When this world is still there, and that person is gone, many things lose their meaning of existence. Why do you think of such a question? Steve looked at Sheenian in confusion. Nothing, I just thought of it suddenly. Sheenian shook his head. This question will also be the biggest problem he needs to face in his future life. The choice that my aunt mentioned also comes from here. Extraordinary, ordinary people. A difference of one thought. Sheenian, Sr. Suddenly there were two calls from behind, and Sheenian looked back. It was Gwen and Kara. How did they find me? Child, Steve suddenly patted Sheenian on the shoulder and said meaningfully, as a person who has been through it, I want to remind you to cherish the present. Also, take care of your body. Captain, you misunderstood. Sheenian's mouth twitched, thinking about why Captain America is always so frivolous. Captain, see you again if there's a chance. He waved his hand, stood up from the chair, and walked towards Gwen and the others with his backpack. Steve made an okay gesture. Sheenian, who were you talking to just now? Gwen looked at the chair in the distance curiously. Sheenian also looked back, and Captain America had long disappeared from the wooden chair by the lake. Sheenian casually said, we met on the road and chatted for a few words. Really? Gwen blinked, doubtful, but did not ask further. Kara next to him looked thoughtful. Sheenian and his group continued to go shopping and have fun, and it was dark when they came to their senses. After nightfall, the city that never sleeps, New York, glows with more vitality. For young boys and girls who are young and in love, night is the best time to create miracles. Especially when traveling, there is just an excuse to take a temporary rest in another place for one night. This is the perfect time and place. In a local hotel in Queens, New York. What, only one room left? Sheenian frowned after asking at the front desk. He thought about it and took out his bank card and slapped it on the table, then let's open one. Sheenian, this is not good. Behind him, Gwen's ears were red. This was too exciting and bold for her. Senior. Kara also shook his hand a little shyly, as if she wanted to say something but stopped. What are you thinking about? Sheenian scratched his head and arranged. Tonight, you two will stay here. I will go to the nearby streets and find another hotel to rest. Quote. The unexpected path and ending made the two beautiful girls dumbfounded again. The hotel receptionist opened her mouth wide when she saw this scene, not knowing what to say. Please, be a human being. After arranging the accommodation for childhood sweetheart Jae Wen and schoolmate Kara, Sheenian couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He carried a school bag with a small orange cat's head occasionally exposed, and walked along the street outside the hotel entrance to look for accommodation. Under the night, neon lights flickered. The busy streets were crowded with cars. Sheenian joined the crowd and walked, at the same time, in a corner of the same street. In the dark alley without lighting, damp and smelly, a pool of unknown static water on the ground suddenly moved on its own. The viscous black gelatinous liquid seemed to have vitality at this time, rolling and quietly moving to the dark corner of the wall, as if lurking and spying on the pedestrians passing by on the street outside. Is there a human physique suitable for parasitism? I can't hold on any longer. The unknown creature whispered hoarsely in anxiety. It had no actual limbs or brain, just a ball of black liquid, and even the words were unknown. At this moment, a boy with a school bag passed by the street outside the alley. The black liquid creature suddenly moved violently, along the wall of the alley, and chased Sheenian frantically and quickly. Puff! Xinyan staggered while walking on the street. He looked back in surprise and felt someone gently pushed his back. However, there was no one behind him. Is it an illusion? Xinyan muttered to himself. He didn't notice that inside the backpack he was carrying, a pair of cat eyes suddenly stared at a certain part of Xinyan's body. Very quickly, Xinyan found the second hotel not far from where Gwen and the others were. The hotel door was designed in the style of a revolving door. Xinyan stepped forward and stretched out his hand to push the revolving door, but just as he entered a built-in space of the revolving door, his body suddenly trembled violently. A strange feeling from inside and outside filled his heart. What's going on? Xinyan opened his eyes wide in confusion. He looked at his hands in surprise, only to see that his body and the clothes he was wearing were melting rapidly like a snowman in summer. Countless black liquids fell to the ground, and they were sticky and connected to the body with wires. Gulu. In an instant, Xinyan melted into a pool of black liquid, and fell to the ground with the backpack he was carrying. The revolving door, which just separates the inner hotel from the street outside, is in the compartment. A group of dark black liquid moved on the ground. Suffocated, depressed, an unprecedented feeling flooded into Xinyan's body and mind. Having trouble breathing. No, I can't breathe. At this moment, Xinyan felt that he was not suitable to survive on the current planet. It's absolutely true, it was the ability of the Lord of the Dependent that was triggered, so much so that the body was transformed by some kind of transcendent ability. If this continues, will I die? Xinyan was lying on the ground like a ball of boiling liquid, his whole body squirming restlessly. Meow. The cat's meow attracted Xinyan's attention. The school bag that fell to the ground next to him revealed a small orange cat from the zipper gap. It's Xiao Huang. Xinyan's whole body was shocked. At this moment, it was like he was driven by his body's instinct. The black liquid he turned into pounced forward, wrapping the little orange cat in it, and quickly integrated into and attached to the little cat's body. Hotel front desk. Welcome. The front desk clerk saw the revolving door being pushed open and subconsciously raised her eyes. What caught her eye was a black kitten. Where did the wild cat come from? The front desk clerk quickly stepped forward to chase it away. The black kitten squatted on the spot and was stunned for a moment. Then, he quickly picked up the school bag on the ground and rushed out of the rotating door to the street outside. On a busy street, seeing the black kitten suddenly rushing out of the hotel, pedestrians gave way and watched it disappear into the alley around the corner with its school bag. After a while, the open-air rooftop of a 5-story building. The school bag was put aside, and the black kitten stood on the railing on the roof, looking down at the neon-lit modern street below in a daze. Who I am? I am the symbiote, the venom. No, I am the element-devouring beast, the larva. No, no, no. None of it is right. The black kitten covered its head humanely and struggled for a while, and soon its eyes showed a bright light. I remembered. I am Xinyan Prince, an ordinary human middle school student who lives in downtown Washington. Quote. What happened to me? The black kitten that Xinyan turned into took a deep breath and felt a complicated voice narrating in his mind. A hoarse and evil voice shouted, what happened to this human body? Why is he the leader? Hateful and pathetic. There was also a young and innocent voice saying, Master, are you okay? Hey, I can't control my body anymore. I'm locked in a dark room. Please be quiet and let me rub it for a while. Xinyan rubbed his temples and squatted on the ground to clear his mind. Thanks to the sharing of thought information, Xinyan quickly understood what was happening to his body. Everything starts with a voice in his mind, a symbiotic life form named Venom. Venom came from a planet in outer space. It received a spaceship from a biological research company in New York and accidentally arrived in the current world of Earth. As symbionts, they are physiologically and mechanically unable to survive on their own and can only parasitize other organisms. When it comes to symbiote venom, it was discovered that some humans have a physique that is very suitable for symbiosis. After some searching, Xinyan was finally chosen as the parasitic host. Next, a more complicated problem comes. Symbiotes are neither male nor female and have no gender. But in a way, they can be regarded as male and female. When the symbiote parasitized Xinyan, it naturally reached the potential condition of close contact. In addition, when the liquid and Xinyan merged symbiotically, the liquid in the body reached a shared exchange. As a result, Xinian's ability, the Lord of Families, was triggered. Xinian acquired the characteristics and abilities of the symbiote venom, which led to the scene where his body melted into a black liquid just now. What happens next is easy to understand. Under the parasitic instinct, Xinian coexists with the little orange cat Xiao Huang. To put it simply, the venom parasitized Xinian, and Xinian parasitized Xiao Huang. Symbiotes, humans, and element-devouring beasts, three different races of creatures accidentally merged into one. Among them, Xinian is the leader, but the thoughts of venom and Xiaohuang can both be shared and conveyed. Human beings actually have such extraordinary abilities. Symbiote Venom also understood the current situation while sharing his mind, and asked doubtfully, "Since you have become a symbiote, why can I still be parasitic on you?" Symbiotes and symbionts can only fight and devour each other, and cannot coexist with each other. I probably know what's going on. Xinian sighed. He did obtain the abilities and characteristics of the symbiote, but he was still essentially a human being, thus forming the current 3-in-1 situation of, the symbiote parasitizes Xinian, and Xinian parasitizes the element-devouring beast. Three creatures coexist together. This is the first time I have encountered this situation. Venom's hoarse and sharp voice sounded in Xinian's mind. Suddenly, it said excitedly, "Wait a minute, although I can't control it, I can feel that the body formed by our parasitic coexistence is extremely powerful. Strong, big, I guess so." The corner of Xinian's mouth twitched and he looked at a cat's paw the size of a pudding and didn't know how to describe his current physical condition. His body seemed to be wrapped in a dark black coat, with white markings like lightning on his lower abdomen. That's right, Venom said excitedly. "In this way, we can defeat those guys." Xinian tilted his head, and under the sharing of thoughts, he quickly understood what the symbiote Venom said. There is more than one symbiote that has descended on Earth. There are 3 more. These 3 symbiotes are hostile to Venom. They have a strong sense of colonization and seem to intend to control humans to lead other tribes to invade the Earth. Destroying the Earth again, will it ever end? The people on Earth are eating your rice, right? Xinian rolled his eyes, not happy. But suddenly, the black kitten trembled slightly, and turned around and looked behind him as if he had sensed something. On the other side of the building where he was, a model girl climbed up from the outer wall of more than 10 meters. The model girl was like a puppet, her body movements were slightly stiff, her eyes were dull, and her bare hands were covered with brown barbs. "It's my kind. We symbiotes can sense each other's location," Venom warned loudly in Xinian's mind. "Why didn't you say it earlier?" Xinian moved his limbs and turned into a black lightning and fled backwards. Seeing this, the model girl immediately chased forward at an inhuman speed, and the brown barbs on her arms continued to grow, like 2 giant and ferocious hammers slamming towards the young cat body. In midair, "I gave you face, didn't I?" The black kitten suddenly turned around, grinning like a devil, and swung its small tail back suddenly. The air was instantly cut by the sharp edge. The tail clearly turned into a 4-meter-long sword that was more than 10 times larger than its own cat body. Swish! The 2 heavy hammer limbs were cut in half. The symbiote that parasitized the model girl was shocked. It never thought that the waste venom of the earth kitten that parasitized would be so powerful. She was just about to evacuate. The dark and cold 4-meter-long sword chopped down, cutting the girl in half from head to toe. Washington. It was late at night, and the daylight in the house was still on. Diana, who had changed into a beige dress at home, was sitting on the sofa in the living room, with her 2 slender and white legs folded together. She leaned against the desk lamp and read books on archaeology and law. She had an intellectual and noble temperament. It's like it has settled into a halo of light lining the side. However, even though she had been concentrating on reading the book, Diana still raised her eyes in the direction of the door from time to time. Obviously knowing that Xinian will stay in New York tonight and will not come back. However, she would still subconsciously and repeatedly do this behavior that even Diana herself found unbelievable. Is it because you are used to it? It is customary for Xinian to come home every day and happily call her aunt, walking around her and telling her happy or sad things. Get used to the warm and ordinary life for 16 years. I'm used to Xinian being around. Am I feeling lonely? Diana was a little surprised, looking at the quiet and empty living room in front of her. Obviously before meeting that child, he had lived alone in the human world for decades. After walking alone for such a long time, why did I feel unbearable loneliness now, less than a day later? Yes, lonely. The goddess who inherited the bloodline of ancient Greek gods seems to be born without much deep understanding of this feeling. After all, the fate of being able to survive forever is destined to be lonely. But obviously, there are levels of loneliness. Diana put the books in her hands back on the bookshelf and walked towards the room with elegant steps. Shenian's room. Without turning on the built-in light in the room, in the quiet darkness, Diana sat on the edge of the bed and slowly lay down. The slightly curly hair bloomed beautifully like petals on the bed. Diana's slender hands gently grasped the duvet, and embraced the boy's familiar scent. Under the elegant white gauze dress, the ivory-like legs tightened little by little, and soon relaxed completely. That child, what is he doing now? Diana's face was a little rosy. She closed her eyes naturally and fell asleep on Shenian's bed. New York, Queens. Venom. I didn't say I wanted to kill her. Shenian, the 3-in-1 Venom cat, opened his animal eyes wide and briefly hovered in the air above the top of the building, looking at the person in front of him being slashed by the armed sword turned into his own tail. Model girl in 2 parts. Now, it's not like he could unilaterally obtain the ability of his aunt or the element-devouring beast before. In the special case of parasitism plus parasitism, Shenian possesses the 2 racial abilities of Venom and Yuan-devouring beast. He internally controls the symbiote venom that parasitizes him, and externally controls the host body of the Yuan-devouring beast. The difficulty of mastering the current body has increased by more than 1 level. Fortunately, Shenian is not the only one with random groping abilities this time. The consciousness of Venom and the devouring beast is like the secondary system of the host computer, which can appropriately remind Shenian of his own racial abilities, as well as put forward the best action plan and suggestions for the next step. Well, this is a true 3-in-1 model. This is why Shenian was able to respond accurately just now, and skillfully use the symbiote's transformation ability to transform his tail into an armed sword. However, the first sword was Shenian's decision, and the second sword was slashed under the guidance of Venom. It won't die that easily. Venom's voice sounded in Shenian's mind. Follow its words. Reflected in Shenian's cat-like eyes, there was no blood on the model girl's body that was chopped into 2 halves, or even on the hands and wrists that were cut off first. Instead of the blood splashing out, there were strands of brown viscous liquid. Brown liquid gushes out from the incisions on the model girl's body, gathers together, and quickly pulls the 4 parts of the model's body together. In about 2 seconds, the model girl recovered completely and fell to the ground. Venom's hoarse voice sounded. This human woman is hopeless. Looking at her current appearance and behavior, it is obvious that the symbiote in her body is the completely dominant party. In this case, her brain and body have been almost destroyed long ago, and she is equivalent to a vegetative state, with only the last trace of life retained. Signs, unable to make any conscious resistance. In addition to the injury just now, it is also the symbiote in her body that is maintaining it. Once the symbiote dies or leaves her body, she will die immediately. Really, in this case, there is nothing to worry about. Shenian suddenly smiled ferociously, and his small mouth opened in an arc that took up half of the cat's face. The large mouth was full of sharp fangs that intertwined with each other. The black kitten, which was cute before, seemed to have transformed into a little devil from hell. The ruthless violence of the symbiote and the violent wildness of the element-devouring beast continued to affect human rationality, causing even Shenian, who is the dominant member of the 3-in-1, to exhibit unbelievable monster behavior at this time. The symbiote parasitizing the model girl knew that there was no chance of escaping, and a layer of brown hard barbed skin immediately appeared on the entire body. Almost the next moment she formed the symbiote's defensive coat. The black kitten in front moved. The model girl only felt her eyes blurred and had no time to make any preparations for attack or defense. She looked down with some delay, and her chest was so hollow that she could directly see the things on her back. What happened just now? The symbiote parasitic model girl was stunned. The tough symbiote's protective coat, inner flesh, bones, and even internal organs were all broken through in an instant. So fast. The speed is impossible to see clearly. No, just amazing speed can't do this. The model girl covered the big hole in her chest with her hands, and the symbiote in her body surged and continued to repair her body. It's useless, you can't kill it like this. The symbiote can repair itself almost infinitely. Venom shouted hoarsely. The black kitten behind the model girl turned a deaf ear and continued to rush forward with lightning speed. Its small body was like a supersonic missile head. Bang! The model girl, who was also parasitized by the symbiote, once again had a dark hole in the lower abdomen of her body that had not yet been repaired. Tisk, tisk, tisk. The trajectory of the black kitten moving back and forth at high speed was like lightning, leaving deep scratches on the roof of the building, and numerous dense cat claw dents appeared on the surrounding walls. As if being baptized by 1,000 times the storm, the model girl standing in the middle was unable to move. Her body was constantly being torn to pieces, and the speed at which the symbiote could repair the body could not keep up with the destruction. Why? The symbiote in the model girl's body was horrified. That guy Venom, what kind of monster is he parasitizing? The difference in strength is so huge. It couldn't help it. Brown liquid spurted out from the mouth of the girl's remains and quickly rushed to the crowded street below the rooftop. Stop it, it wants to parasitize other human bodies. Venom screamed. Thinking too much. The black kitten waved his hand indifferently, and its armed claws, which were larger than its own size, were like tentacles. It shot forward at a high speed and firmly grasped the brown liquid still above the street. You can't kill me. The brown liquid-shaped symbiote's whole body was boiling violently, struggling to move crazily. Oh, the black kitten showed a weird smile, grabbed the symbiote back close to him, and threw it directly into his open mouth. As soon as Sheenian closed his mouth, not even making a move of swallowing, the symbiote completely disappeared from the world. It's not what it looks like. Instead, he was exiled to the different dimension of the element-devouring beast. Without a host inside, the seemingly difficult-to-kill symbiote will soon lose its life. Quickly, let's clean up the rest in this current situation. Sheenian whispered evilly, hoarsely, looking down at the New York City under the night indifferently. As the three people coexisted for a longer time, his behavior pattern changed. He also gradually favored the venom symbiote and the element-devouring beast. Human reason is distorted and collapsed. But precisely because of this, the power of the three-in-one system began to emerge. New York, a prime location where every inch of land is worth a lot of money, the headquarters building of Stark Industries, which was just completed, is located here. The cool upward-spinning building shape with a futuristic sense of technology, the top-floor outdoor platform large enough to be used as a landing platform for fighter jets, and the unique, Stark, logo, even if it is placed in the center of the high-rise New York City, this building is still outstanding and dazzling. At this time, on the top floor of the Stark headquarters building, in the luxurious hall built into the outdoor platform. How is it here? The gentleman in a decent black suit shook the red wine glass, his hands proudly and unconcealedly opened outward, and the blue light in the middle of his chest overflowed through his shirt, giving a sense of embracing half of the city outside the floor-to-ceiling window. Behind him, a man wearing a gray long shirt, overalls, marten boots, etc., with fluffy hair and sloppy hair, who was extremely inconsistent with the current high-end environment, walked forward. How should I put it? The sloppy man pushed his glasses on his nose, pondered for a moment, and commented, "It is indeed your style and characteristics. In the future, this will also be the headquarters of our alliance." Stark smiled. It couldn't be better. This can directly upgrade our alliance, which has not yet been launched, to several levels. The sloppy man shrugged and said, "I don't have money, and I can only help at most. More than just strength." Stark shook his head gently, looked at him sincerely and said, "Banner, I also need your wisdom and knowledge. With your help, I believe that many of my technological ideas and thoughts can be realized in the future." The sloppy man named Banner did not comment. Facing Stark's exaggerated praise in the industry, his face was still surprisingly calm. Because, in the field of science and technology, he does have the capital. Banner. Full name, Robert Bruce Banner. As a world-renowned physicist with 7 doctoral degrees, if he had not been incognito in recent years, he would also be a scientist who often appeared in newspapers. In addition, he has another unknown identity, which is also the biggest reason why he has been hiding in the back of the world in recent years: the Hulk. Not long ago, the hatred that appeared in Washington was indirectly caused by him. Banner. Stark was about to say something, but at this moment, a beeping warning sound came from somewhere on the top floor. Jarvis, what happened? Stark asked with a frown. Suddenly, from above a table in the luxurious hall on the top floor, hundreds of rays of light intertwined in the air, quickly forming a three-dimensional virtual projection image. Artificial intelligence responded in a gentle and concise male voice, "Sir. Just now, there was a special accident involving the extraordinary field in Queens. This is the scene." Banner heard the words and looked at the virtual projection curiously. The opening line of the video played by the virtual projection was a scream. On the main road next to the bustling modern street, a specially modified muscle car was roaring and racing at full horsepower. Red light, intersection, boom boom boom, sparks flew. The muscle car directly knocked away several vehicles blocking the front, as if in a panic, and continued to accelerate and reverse into the opposite main road. Seeing that the muscle car was about to crash into the parked cars, the next scene made Stark and Banner's pupils shrink violently. The muscle car that was driving fast suddenly stopped, like a shadow of black fog flashed by, and the next moment the front of the car suddenly and strangely sank inward, and then the whole body burst in two. It was like being torn apart by some terrifying force. Then, an even more terrifying scene appeared. From the muscle car that was about to explode and disintegrate, several human male remains fell out and were thrown in different directions of the streets around the intersection. Two of the bodies just sank into the crowd standing in a daze on the pedestrian street. Terror and blood fell. What jumped out? Go! The screams rang again, and the black flash flashed at the intersection and chased into one of the streets. The images played by the virtual projection ended here. What happened just now? Stark looked at Banner with a look of surprise, and Banner shook his head, indicating that he also didn't see it clearly. Jarvis, rewind the image. Stark thought and gave the order. Yes, sir. Under the guidance of artificial intelligence. In the virtual projection, the previously played images kept rewinding until the muscle car was destroyed. It's here, zoom in the image in front of the car and play it slowly. Stark said in a deep voice. The image began to play. Under the slow zoom lens, it can be clearly seen that a small black animal shadow passed through the group of cars parked on the road and hit the front of the muscle car like a cannonball. Play frame by frame, Stark said. At this time, all the images seemed to be frozen. At the normal playback speed, the mysterious things that could not be seen clearly were also presented. Banner opened his eyes wide in shock. The black shadow turned out to be a cat. Yes, it has no hair, and looks like a kitten covered in a smooth and tough black coat. At the moment when the kitten violently crashed into the muscle car, which was running at full speed, stopped moving forward. Then, the body of the black kitten suddenly expanded several times, and its limbs bulged with huge and tough tendons and muscles, and a pair of ferocious front paws violently pulled the body of the muscle car to both sides. This is the root cause of the muscle car explosion. At the moment when the muscle car was torn apart, the weird and terrifying black monster turned back to its previous kitten form and chased after a piece of the body at a very fast speed. What kind of creature is that? Stark's face became more and more solemn, and what scared him even more was that Dr. Banner, who was standing next to him, suddenly turned blue and twitched slightly with some difficulty breathing. Jarvis. Stark subconsciously took a few steps back and stepped into a position in the luxurious hall. Artificial intelligence. Jarvis quickly understood what his master meant. A metal lifting platform rose from the floor under Stark's feet. With a series of mechanical arms and parts running, one piece of golden red metal shell was buckled on his body. In less than 5 seconds, Stark's entire body was covered in a steel coat, and the energy grooves on his chest and the metal eye sockets glowed white like an iron god. Calm down, Banner. Stark, who had transformed into Iron Man, raised his hand and comforted Banner, whose face was blue. I'm fine. Banner clenched his hands into fists and kept breathing rapidly to calm his excitement. His face changed back and forth between blue and white. Finally, Banner held the table in frustration, and the bulging blue veins on his neck disappeared completely. Seeing this, Stark breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Stay here and don't move. I'll go deal with things outside." "Wait, Tony." Banner, a little exhausted, held on to the chair and called Stark. He pointed at the black shadow on the virtual screen and said anxiously, "That monster is very dangerous. Seeing it is like pulling the trigger of a pistol into my mouth. My body instinctively wants to turn into the Hulk." Chapter 31. A pedestrian street shrouded in neon. A decayed human body fell on the floor tiles, causing the onlookers to scream and run away. "Call out." A black flash passed by, and Shi Young landed delicately next to the remains. His vertical pupils were like burning bluish-white flames, and the body wrapped in dark black skin had the appearance of assembly line muscles. Venom said hoarsely in his mind, "It has parasitized another human nearby. Obviously, it is much more powerful than the first symbiote, and can almost choose any human as a symbiotic host." Which human? The black kitten was like the most terrifying hunter, its cat eyes coldly scanning the passers-by who were fleeing. Among these passers-by, there is no obvious sign of being parasitized by the symbiote. He quickly understood that the second symbiote wanted to take advantage of the chaos to escape. "Where is the symbiote?" Xin Yan grinned and urged irritably. The instincts and bestiality of the symbiote and the element-devouring beast are intertwined and raging, pulling human rationality to the edge of collapse. Violence, wildness, indifference and other inhuman evils invade the body and mind. This also makes Xinian's behavior become more and more wanton and crazy. Just like before, Xinian was torn apart and strangled together with the human host parasitized by the symbiote. Even though he already knew that the human being could not be saved, and if he continued to delay, the other party would kill more innocent people on the road, what he did was indeed the optimal solution at the time, but he did not hesitate to carry out this bloodthirsty and brutal behavior is already far different from what we thought when we were human beings. Venom said, "I can only sense within 30 meters, but there are so many humans nearby, more than 100 people, that I can't determine which human being is parasitized." Its voice was hoarse and sharp, like a demon whispering a suggestion. "I think the best solution at the moment is to kill all the humans at the scene. Otherwise, more people will die once the other party escapes. Don't hesitate, make your choice quickly, or the other party will escape in the crowd." "Shut up," Xinian growled hoarsely. Looking at the humans fleeing in all directions, he suddenly inserted one of his claws into the ground below. Laugh. Along with the violent tremors of the entire pedestrian street, dozens of terrifying cracks spread across the flat surface, centered on the black kitten-shaped Xinyan. Then, using the 30-meter range as the dividing point, hard tentacles made of black mucus broke out of the ground and stabbed straight up into the city night sky 10 meters above. Dozens of hard tentacles formed a dense barbed railing, trapping everyone within 30 meters. Dead silence. The scene was completely silent. Countless people raised their eyes in horror, dominated by huge fear. At the same time, I also recalled the shame of being imprisoned in a birdcage. Ahem, I went to the wrong set. Find it for me. Xinian kept one paw on the ground, motionless, and the other paw turned into a tentacle to reach out to the people surrounding him. "Monster, don't come here." Many people screamed and fell to the ground. But they soon discovered that the tentacles stretched out were soft, as if they had ordinary cat claw pads. The tentacles just touched the shoulders or chest, and then quickly moved around, touching and checking the people surrounded by the tentacle railings one by one. Xinian is searching for the second human host of the symbiote through contact. After all, symbionts can parasitize silently. When there is no conscious control, often even the host himself does not know that he has been parasitized. When more than half of the people were investigated in Xinian. Among the crowd, a middle-aged man standing at the back frowned slightly and touched his chest inexplicably. For some reason, he was sweating profusely on his body, and the sweat wet the inner lining of his body. Obviously, after knowing that the tentacles would not hurt anyone, most of the fear has disappeared. Scared to death. The second symbiote is parasitic and lurking in a middle-aged man. Through the man's shared perspective, he knows that the host of the venom is about to find him, and he can't help but tremble in horror. Before that, it was unable to sense the first symbiote and knew that the symbiote had been killed. After being discovered by Xinian, it kept switching between parasitic hosts and escaping. In the process of escaping, it became more and more aware of the power of the venom host. The gap is too big. When their symbionts exist alone, it is difficult to achieve even the most humble existence. After parasitizing onto a suitable organism, it can exert a series of abilities such as body hardening, transformation, super strength, super speed, etc. These abilities are closely related to the physique of the parasitic host. But after rotating so many human hosts, the second symbiote discovered that the strength it could exert was far inferior to the performance of the venom host. How could it know? Xinian's current state does not only exert the effect of venom parasitism. Instead, it was superimposed. After being parasitized by the venom, he parasitized the element-devouring beast with the nature of a symbiote. The effect is not as simple as 1 + 1. Boss symbiote, it's impossible to come and save me. I'm going to die. I'm going to die here. The second symbiote was anxious and restless in the middle-aged man's body. Xinian's tentacles had already screamed not far in front of him. The host it is currently parasitic on is about to be found. What to do? What to do? What to do? Death is approaching. The second symbiote felt desperate, but at this moment, it seemed to sense something. The parasitic middle-aged man turned his head and looked at the two people in the crowd inexplicably. It was a woman in her early 30s, holding a boy of about 10 years old. Although the woman was terrified, she still comforted the child in a low voice. "Peter, it's okay, don't worry. Aunt May is here, she will definitely protect you." Peter nodded, looked at the terrifying black kitten with some fear, and mustered up the courage to stand in front of Aunt May's body. Suddenly, his hair stood up, and his sidelong glance just met the empty sight of the middle-aged man. As if being stared at by the evil abyss, Peter was frightened and turned pale. He subconsciously stretched out his finger and blurted out, "The monster that the black kitten is looking for, is him." "Peter, what are you talking about?" Aunt May was stunned. "What are you talking about? I'm not a monster." The middle-aged man also felt a little unbelievable, and couldn't help but refute it out loud, but suddenly, he opened his eyes in horror, and a ball of gray-green viscous liquid gushed out of his open mouth. Half of the liquid was still in the man's body, and the other half was suspended in the air, wriggling like a life feature. The strange scene that subverted cognition stunned everyone around, and they stood there unable to move. "Found you." The 3-in-1 Xinian was extremely decisive in killing. The moment the second symbiote was exposed, the extended tentacles immediately turned into tentacle spikes, hardened, and stabbed forward to kill. Piercing through the air, the tentacles pierced through the body of the gray-green symbiote like a nail, nailing it to the tentacle railing behind. ZZ. The second symbiote surged and boiled violently, and the nailed part suddenly separated. The other part of the liquid body was like a spraying water gun, and it seemed like a gray-green net, rushing towards the woman not far to the side. "Aunt May, be careful." Peter opened his hands to block Aunt May, so the gray-green liquid penetrated into his body very smoothly. "Ah!" The childish screams of pain rang out in the New York City night sky and spread far and wide. The next second his body was parasitized by the symbiote, the boy covered his head with his hands, his eyes were covered with a gray-green color, and he knelt on the ground in extreme pain. "Get away from him quickly." Someone yelled this in fear, and people immediately retreated in panic. Focusing on the boy who was parasitized by the strange monster, everyone except Aunt May evacuated 10 meters away. "Peter, are you okay? Don't scare Aunt May." In the empty field, Aunt May was frightened and worried. She stretched out her hand to help the kneeling boy, but with her strength, she was unable to pull the young body. As for the boy who was kneeling on the ground, with his head lowered so that his face could not be seen clearly, and his hands on the ground, his painful sounds and body struggles became weaker and weaker, and the whole thing became inexplicably calm. This kind of calmness actually makes people nearby shudder. 20 meters away, a boy was chosen as the new host. Seeing the second symbiote's almost desperate choice, the 3-in-1 Xinian felt a little surprised, but he did not stop his decisive and indifferent offensive. Bow. The sharp and hardened dark tentacles pierced the air and stabbed Peter, the boy parasitized by the second symbiote. At this time, Venom's voice sounded in his mind, "Something's not right. I can vaguely sense that the physique of that human child is different from that of ordinary humans." As if following the words of the symbiote Venom, at the moment when the tentacle spike was about to hit, one of the boy's small hands raised up like lightning, and unexpectedly firmly grasped the high-speed sniping tentacle. The tip of the dark hardened tentacle suddenly stopped, about 1 centimeter in front of Peter's chest. Gia Gia, a hoarse and cold voice sounded, and the boy holding the tentacles let out an inhuman grin. The surface of his body began to ooze gray-green viscous liquid. This viscous liquid rapidly expanded, twisted, deformed, and hardened, to form a more complete and tough gray-green reproductive body and cortex. The whole scene looked like Peter's body had deformed into an adult, turning into a gray-green alien monster nearly 2 meters tall. Gray-green, tall, and a sense of strength that can be seen from the strong muscles alone. This time reminded Xinian of hatred. However, it is still very different from the appearance of hatred. The shape of the second symbiote parasitic boy currently shows a body outline that is strong but not bloated. The arms and legs have a tough and slender feel, especially the pale poisonous spider pattern on the chest and back. I didn't expect that there would be such a powerful physique among humans. Looking down at the gray-green palm that was holding the hand, the poisonous spider smiled ferociously, grinned and spit out its long scarlet tongue, and a stream of heat came out of the strong and deformed body. After parasitizing the human child Peter, the ability of the symbiote was revealed to its fullest for the first time. It feels that it is stronger than ever before. Facts have proved that this is indeed the case. The poisonous spider just tried it and easily received the tentacle attack launched by the venom host. That was a terrifying attack that I couldn't resist at all. This makes it feel that it is stable. Okay again. With this body as a parasitic host, I am the real boss of the symbiote. The poisonous spider was extremely excited and licked its sharp and ugly fangs. Peter, Peter, a woman's miserable and trembling voice came from the side. You are not Peter. Aunt May looked at the poisonous spider nearby and suppressed her fear without retreating. She whimpered, "Monster, give Peter back to me quickly. Gia Gia, I will kill you first, and then kill the venom and his parasitic host." The poisonous spider sneered ferociously, raised its gray-green palm and whizzed at the woman's crying face. At this time, a hoarse and cold voice suddenly sounded from the front, "Have you caught enough?" Before the poisonous spider's palm was completely captured, he was shocked to find that the tentacles it had been holding suddenly latched onto its palm. Holding hands, but not friendly and wonderful. At that moment, the poisonous spider only felt an indescribable terrifying force transmitted from the dark tentacles, forcibly pulling its entire strengthened and armed body. Xinian's extended tentacles pulled the poisonous spider upwards and threw it, nearly 30 meters above the ground, before slamming it down to the ground below again. Bang! The earth trembled and screamed. The poisonous spider smashed into the ground, gravel flew, and a hole several meters deep was made on the street. The poisonous spider covered in dirt roared angrily and rushed out of the pit. With a flip of its wrist, it shot out 2 gray-green spider threads and fixed them on the tentacle railing behind Xinian. Pulling the spider silk violently, the poisonous spider quickly made a sliding shovel at low altitude and kicked violently towards Xinian. The black kitten was still squatting motionless on the ground. With one hand still inserted into the ground to form a tentacle railing, the cat's tail behind it suddenly twitched forward. The air bursts. There was just a pop sound, and very quickly, the poisonous spider was swatted away like a fly. How is this possible? The body came into close contact with the ground again, and the poisonous spider was completely stunned. Why? It has become stronger by many times, but in terms of strength, speed, deformation and other superpowers, it is still not as good as the host parasitized by the venom. Or rather, in the symbiotic form of the human boy who parasitized the current spider ability and physique, the second symbiote can better understand the terrifying strength of the 3-in-1 Xinian. Who is the monster? The venomous spider leapt at a very fast speed, and the spider silk shot towards the tall building in the distance. Seeing that it could not beat Xinian, it wanted to continue to implement its own strategy escape. But the dark tentacles were faster than it. The tentacles quickly wrapped around the venomous spider's feet, and the increasingly impatient and violent Xinian dragged it between the night sky and the earth, throwing and smashing it again and again. Bang, bang, bang. I don't know how many times the venomous spider was thrown and smashed. Xinian calmed down a little and let go of the tentacles, and in front of it, there were already potholes and pits. The dust fell. The poisonous spider lying in one of the holes was lying on the ground. Most of its armed body had melted, like a damaged vehicle with green oil flowing all over the ground, and it could no longer maintain a complete armed fighting posture. The scene can only be described in one word: tragic. Can the host it parasitizes be saved? Xinyan barely maintained a trace of rationality and asked in a cold voice. Venom's demonic whisper sounded. It's hard to say. The boy's physique is indeed special, but he is too young. We can only see if he can take back the dominance of his own body. It smiled grimly. My suggestion is, don't delay, just wipe out the host directly. Xinyan didn't speak, and the tentacles began to turn into a giant sickle, hanging above the poisonous spider's head. There is little human rationality left, and the 3-in-1 him is becoming more bloodthirsty and indifferent. The invincible and terrifying kitten is like the incarnation of death, hanging a black sickle on the poisonous spider's head. Xinyan had clearly proven this when he had previously fought the first symbiote. Even if the symbiote can quickly repair the host's injuries, there are certain limits. Once the damage suffered by the parasitic host far exceeds the speed of repair within a short period of time, the symbiote will be unable to maintain the host's life and will be forced to leave. But in this case, obviously, the host it parasitizes will also die. Please, don't kill him. Aunt May rolled and crawled in front of the poisonous spider, opened her arms, and blocked the black sickle with her thin body. At this time, Sanhei Xinyan, whose rationality was collapsing, could no longer listen to her words and would only decisively carry out what he thought was right. Even if everything he is doing now seems to be a villain's act. At the critical moment, boom, one side of the tentacle railing was penetrated and blasted by 2 laser beams. Under the surprised eyes of the people trapped inside, a figure clad in a golden-red steel battle suit fell from the sky. Bang! His left knee and right fist hit the ground at the same time, making a dull metallic sound. The being who looked like a man-made steel god stood up, with his raised palm right in the middle of the engine mouth, which was accumulating a dazzling white light that shocked the scene. It's really lively here tonight. Ignoring the atmosphere, Iron Man joked in a cheerful tone. It's Iron Man. Iron Man is here, we are saved. Very good. He immediately dispelled the fear and despair that enveloped the current situation and became the backbone of the trapped people at the scene. In the city of New York, probably only Iron Man can do it. This is not a live fan reception. Iron Man continued to tease. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please leave here first? At his words, people immediately reacted and left through the broken tentacle railing behind Iron Man. From the moment he appeared until now, Iron Man has acted relaxed and natural, as if he has grasped the overall situation of the scene. But, what no one knows is, at this moment, inside the steel suit, Stark's face was solemn and nervous, staring at the harmless-looking black kitten on the field, and whispered, Jarvis, can you tell who the other party is? Biology. Sorry, sir. There is currently no information in the database. The scan cannot detect the other party's body. We can only make a preliminary judgment that it is an alien organism. 2 unknown alien creatures are fighting each other. Stark kept his hands facing the enemy and glanced at the poisonous spider lying behind the woman. He could easily make a judgment based on the traces on the scene. At this time, the black kitten's paws that had been stuck on the ground moved. Iron Man was shocked, mistakenly thinking that the other party wanted to kill the evacuating people, and couldn't help but fire a laser cannon. The laser beam, as bright as daylight, suddenly lit up the street and hit the black kitten's head in the blink of an eye. Boom! The scorching energy and firelight washed over the young body. Xinyan retracted his claws from the ground. Now that the symbiote had been found, there was no need for the tentacle railings. But Iron Man, who shot it in the head without saying a word, made him a little bit excited. If you use Xinyan's normal thinking, you might just think it's a misunderstanding. But now it's the 3-in-1 Xinyan. This is the year when human rationality almost ceases to exist. He is a violent, bloodthirsty, wild, extreme, and evil-minded Xinyan. Then, while the extremely destructive laser energy ripples washed along the dark body surface, the black kitten-shaped Xinyan turned into a black stream of light, broke through the sound barrier, and slammed forward into Iron Man's lower abdomen. Bang! Iron Man felt like he was hit by a miniature truck at full speed. The artificial intelligence Jarvis immediately issued a warning feedback of parts damaged. The steel body suffered a huge impact and hit the outer wall of a tall building behind him. Superior. Fire me. The steel suit sank deep into the wall, and Stark became angry and growled. Suddenly, the strategic weapon device hidden on the shoulder of the steel suit was activated, and 4 micro-missiles dragged their tail flames towards the black kitten. Xinyan was stuck in the air, watching the flying micro-missile, and suddenly opened his mouth violently to 3 or 4 times the size of his body, like a blood plate biting the oncoming micro-missile. Put it in your mouth like a candy. The micro-missiles detonated simultaneously in the mouth, causing Xinyan's face to bulge several times in a row, and then relaxed again. It burped and spit out several rounds of gunpowder-smelling smoke. Stark looked in disbelief. He finally knew why Dr. Banner wanted to become the Hulk in an emergency just now. This cat, it is a truly unreasonable and unscientific monster. Stark gritted his teeth and flew up on the engine of the steel suit, firing missiles and engine lasers with full firepower and power. This moment was like the most brilliant fireworks. Iron Man, suspended dozens of meters above the sky, has completely transformed into a human-shaped turret, and every part of his body is shining brightly. When the artificial intelligence immediately completes the instructions, micro-missiles and laser beams are densely intertwined with Xinyan, who is wrapping the downwards. Xinyan smiled ferociously like a demon, the black hardened claws of his hands, and the tail that turned into a slender tentacle, slapped together at high speed and continuously. Shooting small missiles is like swatting mosquitoes. Boom boom boom. The targeted explosions of missiles and lasers shattered the air, and the terrible shock waves swept across, shattering all the glass windows on both sides of the street. Suddenly, one of the small missiles deviated from its trajectory and bombarded Aunt May, who was still at the scene. Not good. Iron Man saw this scene, but it was too late to stop it. Aunt May opened her eyes wide in horror, and seeing that the small missile was about to fall on her, the poisonous spider that was lying on the ground suddenly turned over. The poisonous spider pressed Aunt May to the ground, and its gray-green deformed body acted as a human shield to block the explosion impact of the small missile. In the surging flames, the poisonous spider melted half of its head with armed liquid, slightly revealing a corner of Peter's tender and immature face, and a tear that could be called human nature dripped down on Aunt May's face. The explosion center was enough to blow an entire building into ruins. Xinyan, who was wrapped in a black skin, was unharmed, and he was still thinking about the situation of the poisonous spider below. Venom was also slightly surprised and screamed. That human boy actually took back some of the dominance. But it's probably only temporary. Soon, the symbiote in his body will completely take over the dominance. You mean, he can still be saved now? Xinyan's eyes regained a trace of clarity, and the rational heartstrings that had been broken were connected again. Venom responded. Now, as long as there is a way to separate him from the symbiote, he can survive. I know. Xinyan glanced at the poisonous spider below, and then looked at Iron Man above, and suddenly a flash of inspiration flashed in his mind. His 2 claws suddenly stretched out and shot out, wrapping around Iron Man's feet and hands respectively. A question mark popped up in Iron Man's mind, and then he was pulled down suddenly, until his body sank into a dark hole. Xinyan closed his mouth and fell back to the ground lightly. The streets were filled with smoke, and Iron Man had completely disappeared. This was the best suggestion from the devourer he parasitized. Silence. Deathly silence. On the streets of Queens. When they saw the 3-in-1 Xinyan falling alone on the ground, many passers-by shooting videos with their mobile phones in the distance, or media reporters broadcasting online, were all stunned like wooden statues. They opened their mouths in horror, and a cold air far colder than the current winter frost and snow surged down their backs and into their hearts. The Iron Man Tony Stark, who became a well-deserved hero in New York within a year and a half of his debut as a superhero, and who intimidated the whole world with the light of cross-century technology. Now, being devoured by an unknown monster. Just like in a real sense, witnessing the death of the omnipotent God, there is a feeling of faith collapse. Tonight is destined to be a night of despair for countless people in New York City. Xinyan, the culprit on the field, didn't think so much. He just felt that Iron Man's interference was too troublesome and would greatly affect the action of hunting the symbiote, so he simply removed the opponent, ban. Fall back to the ground. Xinyan took steps and came behind the poisonous spider who was protecting Aunt May with his body. Although it looks like a body slightly larger than an adult's hand, harmless to humans and animals, and slightly cute, the poisonous spider dominated by Peter's consciousness at this time clearly understands how terrifying and inexplicable the unknown creature in the shape of a black kitten is in front of him. Existence. Realizing that Xinyan was approaching its body, the poisonous spider held its gray-green hands on the ground and pressed its knees to the ground, revealing some of Peter's inner features. Its face twisted, and it said intermittently in pain, "Kill me." Quote, "Please, kill me. I can't control it anymore." As he spoke, the gray-green viscous liquid on his body began to squirm, like rotten and evil sludge, eroding back on the boy's exposed face bit by bit. "No, Peter." Aunt May underneath burst into tears, reaching out to peel off the gray-green liquid on the poisonous spider's face, but to no avail. At the moment, Peter is about to be re-encased in the symbiote's reproductive weapons. The 3-in-1 Xinian nodded indifferently and raised his cat's paw. "Then, as you wish." Giggle. The bones were crackling, and Xinian's extended and enlarged claws clamped the poisonous spider's hands from behind, lifting its body upwards, and the dark black tail bounded the poisonous spider's feet forward like tentacles. He ignored Aunt May, who was crying beside her. The corners of the black kitten's mouth were exaggeratedly split, far beyond the outline of the face, turning into a bloody mouth with intertwined fangs. Venom chuckled in his mind. It should have been like this, just swallow it up. Xinian ignored its words, but said inexplicably, "Be patient for a while." The venom parasitizing in Xinian's body was stunned, and suddenly had an extremely ominous premonition. "Wait a minute, what do you want to do?" Xinian did not swallow the poisonous spider into the dimension of the devouring element, but just took a deep breath, so big that his chest quickly expanded like a balloon. After a while, his body swelled about 5 to 6 times its original size. Venom read Xinian's thoughts and immediately growled, "You are crazy. Stop right now." Xinian ignored it and was even less likely to stop. He raised the poisonous spider over his head, brewed it, and then raised his lower jaw. Xinian's mouth was aimed at the poisonous spider and suddenly opened. The next second, people within a radius of 5 miles subconsciously covered their ears, and countless glass windows, car windows, and light bulbs burst. "Hold head high." A terrifying and high-pitched sound roared out of his mouth. Xinian was like an eternal monster roaring up to the sky. The sound waves were like layers of tides, roaring and exploding in the nearby air. The sound waves turned into actual sound waves, with an indescribable impact. If it hadn't spread towards the night sky, a layer of skin would have been lifted off the earth. The ultrasonic wave was shouted directly. This terrifying and powerful scene made a figure appear in many people's minds. That is the human god far away in Metropolis, Superman. Zitza. The poisonous spider withstood the scouring and baptism of ultrasonic waves, and its tough reproductive coat immediately exploded, like boiling water in a hot pot. Laugh. Threads of gray-green mucus were peeled off from the poisonous spider. Under the impact of ultrasonic waves, the second symbiote began to be forced to split from its host Peter. Of course, it wasn't just the second symbiote that suffered the ultrasonic strike. "What are you doing? Stop it quickly, and you will also be able to release the symbiotic state." Venom wailed in extreme pain. He never expected that Xinian would use this method, injuring the enemy 1,000 times and damaging himself 8 times. Hundreds of means. In the form of only one symbiote parasitic on humans, it is absolutely impossible to generate ultrasonic waves by roaring alone, and this can only be achieved in a 3-in-1 state with the superimposition of the element devouring beast. Wait, what's going on? Venom, which began to disintegrate itself, quickly realized that the ultrasound did not have any impact on Xinian's body. Xinian, who has returned to human rationality, smiled and responded truthfully with his mind. "I only obtained your abilities, but I did not inherit the corresponding weaknesses." "So you've already noticed it?" Venom suddenly realized. From the beginning, Xinian did not plan to deal with only the second symbiote but also included it. "Xinian, you fool." Before Venom finished speaking, his liquefied body had been forced to separate from Xinian and leave the symbiotic state. However, since Xinian was parasitic on the Devourer, Venom was directly stuck in the Devourer's body. And since two symbiotes cannot exist on the same host at the same time, with Xinian's symbiote being extremely powerful and without ultrasonic weakness, Venom had no power to rob the host of permission and could only be forced to enter hibernation on the Devourer. After breaking away from the 3-in-1 state, Xinian continued to parasitize on the Devourer as a symbiote alone. In his mind, the evil and negative thoughts that affected him were swept away. Only the Devourer's Meow, cheered. Xinyan breathed a sigh of relief and had regained all his human sanity. Recalling the state just now, he still felt a palpitation. The 3-in-1 state is indeed unimaginably powerful. But in that state, thoughts and actions will become more extreme and evil, until it becomes a monster that pursues killing purely. Symbiote venom is very cooperative on the surface, but in fact it has been leading him to sink into the abyss of rationality, trying to seize the dominance of this body. Symbiote venom fell into a shutdown-like dormancy. Xinyan parasitized on the devourer, and the overall appearance was still a black kitten, but there was no white stripes on the lower abdomen, and the cold and evil aura on the body disappeared, more like an ordinary kitten. Xinyan looked up and looked at the second symbiote separated from Peter. He did not hesitate and opened his mouth again, this time turning into a bottomless black hole, swallowing the second symbiote that wanted to escape. Devourer, exile. In an unknown and mysterious space. There is darkness above, below, left and right here, endless darkness, extending to the end without boundaries. It's like a corner of the outer universe, but without any starlight. Iron Man flew and wandered in this space at extremely high speeds, like a steel ghost. The dazzling white light of the energy source and engine on his chest broke through the fog, dragging an obvious light white tail flame trail. No matter how hard he flew, he couldn't reach a place where he could land. Jarvis, answer me, Jarvis. Stark inside the steel suit called out for the 5th time. But, as always, there was no sound in response. From the moment he entered here, Stark lost contact with the artificial intelligence Jarvis, and the network signal showed none. It stands to reason that Stark uses his own industry-specific satellite signal. As long as he is in any corner of the Earth, such bizarre situations of disconnection should not occur. Is this really no longer on Earth? Stark was flustered for no reason. Even before he became Iron Man and was imprisoned in a cave by criminals, he had never been so flustered. Because if this wasn't Earth, there would be nothing he could do. There is no possibility of self-rescue or return to Earth. What's that? At this moment, Stark suddenly saw something floating in the darkness ahead, and couldn't help but rely on the engine of the steel suit to get closer. Take a closer look. Stark was stunned. Those were actually several corpses. Several corpses have existed in this space for an unknown period of time. The humanoid bodies have long since decayed and exposed their bones. They are wearing the aerospace uniforms of an unknown civilization and have a strange-looking laser gun on their chests. These corpses also have tail or wing parts. Stark's eyelids twitched, and there was an uproar in his heart. It's the body of an alien. In the hotel, the lights had been turned off, and the room was dark and quiet, with only a few rays of silver falling on the windowsill. Kara, who was lying on the bed, suddenly opened her eyes and turned slightly sideways to look outside the windowsill. Is it an illusion? She just seemed to hear the low roar of an unknown creature, coming from the other side of New York City. The roar contained a very strong sense of evil. There's just one drawback to the Kryptonian's super hearing. Sometimes, information you don't want to hear floods into your ears. So much so that when Kara woke up from her sleep, she often suspected that she was hearing hallucinations and couldn't tell whether the sounds she heard were real or just a dream. In terms of ability control, she is far from as good as her cousin Carl. After all, as Superman, Carl has fully unleashed the Kryptonian superpowers and can freely use them. And she has been hiding her Kryptonian abilities in order to adapt to the human world. If that roar just now is true, Senior, will everything be okay? Kara thought of this and was about to get up. But at this moment, from the side of the bed, the girl's hands and feet suddenly rested on her body. Kara stiffened and looked back. But Gwen, who had already fallen asleep, happened to turn over and used Kara as a doll pillow. When Gwen fell asleep, her sleeping posture was far less intellectually graceful than when she woke up, and was even a bit casual. The quilt on her body has been lifted, and her dress is messy, revealing the girl's white belly. Kara sighed inexplicably and reached out to cover Gwen with the quilt. Gwen didn't know what she was dreaming about. She held Kara as her own doll and muttered with a sweet smile, "Xinian. Senior sister, you are truly shameless." Kara frowned slightly and couldn't help but say something. She looked at the windowsill and finally chose to close her eyes. After all, even if that growling sound was real, it was too far away from the streets of Queens today. No matter what, it's impossible to have anything to do with Senior Sheenian, right? Dispose of the second symbiote. Sheenian put the unconscious Peter on the ground. Aunt May, a woman whose ears were still ringing, immediately rushed forward and hugged Peter into her arms. He's fine. Sheenian threw away these words, and the black cat body jumped forward, stepping on the street light poles and building exterior walls. He made several dexterous leaps and bounds. Although his speed was far less than the previous 3-in-1, he still disappeared into the street very quickly. There is one last symbiote left, and the boss of the symbiotes. It's not over until it's dealt with. From the symbiote venom just now, Sheenian had already obtained the location of the last symbiote. Tonight, the symbiote's position was always fixed in one place and never moved. 5 minutes later, the Bronx, Drake Biological Research Facility. When Sheenian, who was in a symbiotic state with the element-devouring beast, rushed to the door of the factory, he felt the ground in the area shaking violently. The cat's eyes with vertical pupils flickering with green light were raised, and they saw the depths of the closed base factory. With the flames at the tail end erupting like a volcano, a spaceship was in launch mode. The third symbiote, the boss of the symbiote that came to Earth, actually wanted to run away. At this time, inside the spacecraft, Dr. Drake, the founder of Drake Biological Corporation, is alone in the control panel of the spacecraft. His eyes and neck are dark, and he is the host of the last symbiote. As for why he wanted to drive the spaceship away from the Earth now. Of course, he sensed the death of the first and second symbiote subordinates, and saw the powerful power of the 3-in-1 Sheenian in the news report. No matter how conceited the symbiote boss was, he believed that he could not defeat Sheenian. He knew very well that the next prey of the other party would be himself, and he could only escape from the Earth. What kind of monster is the venom parasitizing? It's so powerful. Dr. Drake's expression was distorted. He was scared to flee the planet. This would be a shame for his life. Wait for me, I will definitely come back. Dr. Drake roared in his heart, but he was still calm on the surface, manipulating and adjusting the launch flight on the spacecraft. The spacecraft continued to jet and take off, and was about to rise to a height of more than 100 meters. But abrupt, the rising spacecraft trembled inexplicably, as if it was hit hard by something. He's coming. Dr. Drake's face changed drastically. Outside the spacecraft, the black kitten was like a small thumbtack, fixed on the coated shell of the spacecraft. Since you're here, don't leave. Sheenian opened his mouth and stretched out 8 ferocious tentacles full of small teeth. Under the protection and armament of the dark colony layer of the symbiote, these tentacles are more tenacious and powerful, just like the 8 claws of the legendary Kraken monster. Crack, crack, crack. The tentacles and claws danced wildly, smashing violently on the spacecraft, and the metal shell was immediately dented and damaged, and the flowing electric light sparked sparks. No, don't. In the cabin of the spacecraft, Dr. Drake felt desperate and aggrieved that he would die in the womb before he even appeared on the stage, and he screamed wildly. If the third symbiote knew at this time that Sheenian was no longer the previous 3-in-1, but only a single symbiotic form with the Devourer. If it chose to fight head-on, it would be hard to say who would win or lose, and I don't know what it would feel. However, it was just a hypothesis. What greeted the third symbiote was the surging high-temperature flames in the closed cabin. Boom boom boom. The spacecraft that rose to 500 meters exploded everywhere, turning into a giant burning fireball. The huge explosion also drowned out the sharp roar of the symbiote called Riot inside. Inside the biological research base factory. In a closed office building, a man was looking through information in the dark archives by relying on the faint light of a flashlight. Eddie Brock was originally a well-known local reporter in New York. Some time ago, he accidentally discovered that the Drake Biological Foundation was conducting inhumane human experiments and also involved mysterious and unknown alien creatures. Cultivate more advanced strategic creatures. Eddie originally wanted to announce this huge conspiracy to the public, but was fired by the media company instead. In desperation, he could only sneak into the biological research base to find and investigate evidence about human experiments and alien creatures. Yes, this is it. Eddie, suddenly excited, pulled out a document from the safe, and immediately picked up the flashlight in his mouth and started reading through it. Alien symbiote. Venom. Riot, a liquid life form. Parasitizing a suitable human host can display extraordinary and powerful abilities. Of the 5 human experimental subjects, only one succeeded in symbiosis with its symbiote. The more Eddie read, the more frightened he became. He hurriedly folded the information and stuffed it into the inner pocket of his jacket. Just as he was about to leave here, the entire office building where he was located shook violently. The lamps, tables, and cabinets inside shook, and dust continued to fall from the ceiling. What's wrong? Eddie was surprised. He looked out the window of his office and could see that the spacecraft in the base factory was starting to launch. Boom! Immediately afterwards, the spacecraft that was about to pierce the night sky and rush out of the Earth exploded violently at an altitude of several hundred meters. The orange-red firelight illuminated the huge base below. Eddie was shocked to witness all this, and out of professional habit, he did not forget to take out a small camera to record the scene. Countless fragments of the spacecraft carrying open flames and thick smoke, like meteorites from the sky, streaked across the night sky of the city and fell towards the base. In the camera lens, falling together with the wreckage of the spacecraft, a small black beast shadow flashed past under the light of the fire. In the mysterious dimensional space, insufficient energy. The warning is repeated, the energy is seriously insufficient. The light on Iron Man's chest and eye sockets dimmed, and he could only keep the suit's engine running at extremely low power, allowing himself to stagnate in the middle of the space where alien corpses were floating. The only white light, flickering on and off, is about to sink into darkness. Are you going to die in this unknown ghost place? There was a wry smile on Stark's lips, and he was lost in it. He found that there were countless alien creatures buried in it. Moreover, the clothes and weapons on these corpses varied. This actually verifies Stark's long-held speculation that there are obviously more complex and dense alien advanced civilizations outside the Earth. The creation of the Avengers is the right path for the future. Unfortunately, knowing this in advance is useless now. Stark felt helpless. The energy in his body was about to be exhausted, which meant that this place would also be his burial place. Thinking of this, Stark became much calmer and said softly, "Turn on the built-in camera for personal video archiving." Iron Man's helmet glowed from within, reflecting Stark's tired face. "Leave it to Pepper Potts, Virginia Pepper Potts. I should be dead by the time you see this. Living in such an era of alien invasions and raging mutations, you really don't know when the accident will come early. Maybe I should have been mentally prepared. It's like I was in New York a moment ago, and now, suddenly trapped in a place like this. I tried my best, really. But you have to know. I don't leave this here to complain. I just want to tell you that I actually love you very much." Quote, falling straight from a height of 100 meters to the factory floor, gravel splashed everywhere, and Sheenian stepped into a depression in the ground below. Next to it, the remains and fragments of the spacecraft also fell on the factory building, sparking a raging fire. Sheenian did not relax his vigilance. He carefully sensed the outside and confirmed that the third symbiote was indeed dead, and then he breathed a sigh of relief. Dealing with the third and final symbiote was much easier than imagined. It was also because the symbiote rebels insisted on seeking death and wanted to escape in a spaceship. Instead, they trapped themselves in a closed spacecraft cabin and burned to death in extreme agony. Certainly, if Xyli was a step too late and allowed the other party to escape from the Earth in a spaceship, the result would be different. Now, all 3 symbiotes are dead, and the symbiote venom is dormant in the body of the Devourer. It's over. Sheenian kicked his cat's paw, his body suddenly accelerated, and his small figure jumped over the railing of the base factory. Return to Queen Street at Gwen and Kara's Stay Hotel. Only halfway through, Sheenian, who was parasitic on the element-devouring beast, suddenly remembered something, a very important thing. By the way, I almost forgot. Sheenian didn't stop. While leaping over the tall building, the kitten's mouth opened ferociously and he spat into the block below. Pooh! Suddenly, a golden and red steel body spat out from his mouth and fell in a free fall. Sheenian did not stop, sprinting faster and disappearing into the night of the city. Bang! The dull sound of metal touching the ground rang out, and Iron Man was covered in sticky saliva, sitting in the middle of the street in a daze. What happened? Stark was still a little dizzy. What caught his eyes was naturally the familiar and prosperous modern streets of New York, with cars and people everywhere, and the Christmas songs that were over the moon began to sound on the streets. Seeing more and more people gathering around, some people began to take pictures. Stark was silent for a moment, not lucky enough to survive the disaster, but wanted to swear. WTF. Last words, recorded in vain. Not long after Xinyan left. In the office building of the biological base factory. Eddie looked at the fire outside that had spread to most of the factory, and immediately fled outside in a panic. As a result, he accidentally kicked and hit a chair, causing him to fall heavily on the floor of the office. The scratched palm was burning hot. Eddie struggled to get up again in pain, but at this moment, a cold feeling came from the end of his palm. It was as if something had penetrated through his wound. Eddie stood up and subconsciously looked at his palm. He did not find anything on his hand, but there was no wound at all. It seemed that his palm was not scratched just now. The fire was about to burn to the office building. Eddie did not think too much and hurriedly opened the door and fled. In the early morning, it started to snow lightly in New York, adding a lot of romance to this economic metropolis. Today is also the annual Christmas. Christmas tree decorations can be seen everywhere on the streets, and holiday songs are floating in the streets and alleys. Xinian, Merry Christmas. Good morning, Senior. Two beautiful young girls with different styles, one wearing a red elk Little Red Riding Hood, and the other swinging a light Christmas silver bell on her wrist, were both small gifts that Xinian bought in advance yesterday. They appeared side by side stepping on the white snow on the street, undoubtedly becoming the most beautiful scenery on the pedestrian street. Merry Christmas and good morning. Xinian, carrying his school bag, waved in response and couldn't help but yawn sleepily. In the backpack, the emperor of the Yuan devouring beast was also lying on the pile of clothes, soundly sleeping. Xinian, what were you doing last night? Gwen asked curiously, looking at Xinian's obvious dark circles. Xinian rubbed his messy black hair and replied feebly, I was forced to save the world. Liar. Gwen spat angrily. Xinian shrugged, knowing that Gwen would take this sentence as a joke. Did you not sleep well? Kara said warmly. Yes. Xinian nodded and followed Kara's words, I'm not used to hotel beds. Xinian himself is very fond of beds. If he suddenly changes his bed, he will indeed be unable to sleep. Well, except for my aunt's bed. What's more, he didn't sleep on a bed at all last night. He slept like a stray cat on a tree, and it was difficult not to feel sleepy. Fortunately, the symbiosis ability has been released in time, otherwise it would be impossible to join Gwen and the others in human form now. Xinian sighed secretly, is it easy for him? After Xinian gathered with Gwen and Kara, the three of them continued to browse the morning market, had a simple lunch, and then set off on their way back to Washington. On the train leaving New York, Gwen and Kara flipped through their phones and newspapers and began to learn bits and pieces of information about what happened in New York City last night. Iron Man was eaten alive. Scared. What is that gray-green liquid monster? It's so disgusting. The discussion between the two women was somewhat normal at first, but it soon went awry. Wow, the black kitten is so cute. I really want to hold it. It's so powerful. Seeing that Gwen and Kara were not afraid, but actually liked the black kitten, Xinian blinked and said, I think that cat looks a bit like a little emperor. When Gwen and Kara heard this, they all looked at the orange kitten sleeping on Xinian's lap. In fact, the first moment they saw the black kitten, they felt like the little emperor Xinian was carrying. However, when they first heard Xinian mention it, they felt that Xiao Huang was very different from the black kitten. There are obvious differences in appearance, coat color, and even aura. In particular, the presence of the black kitten in the news reports posed a subtle threat to Kara herself, but for Xiao Huang at the moment, in her opinion, even special alien creatures were far from posing a threat. Seeing Kara shake her head, Gwen smiled and retorted, Xiao Huang, he is different from that black kitten. Yes, Xinian nodded in agreement, feeling relieved in his heart. This level has also been passed. But, looking at that black kitten, I feel inexplicably familiar. Gwen muttered doubtfully. Me too. Kara smoothed her platinum hair that was shining under the sunlight, and a look of doubt flashed in her beautiful eyes, it seems like I have seen her before somewhere. Is this the legendary sixth sense of women? How could I have seen it before? It's so dangerous and scary, but even Iron Man has eaten it. Xinian quickly became careless and directed the topic elsewhere. No matter what, after the topic of the superhero silver-haired goddess set off the entire internet, after today, the mysterious creature Black Kitten will also become a nightmare for many people. For example, a certain billionaire or playboy would wake up from his sleep from time to time, dreaming that he was being swallowed into an unknown space again. This also led to the future Stark Industries rushing to produce a strategic weapon codenamed Anti-Black Flash Black Kitten Armor overnight. Washington. Saying goodbye to Gwen and Kara at the station, especially Officer George, who drove to take Gwen home, gave Sheenian a meaningful look when he drove away. Sheenian pretended not to see it. After continuing to send Kara away in a taxi, the sky outside the street had darkened, and thousands of neon lights were dimly glowing under the cover of snowflakes. Christmas Eve is coming, Sheenian thought for a while, and instead of heading home with his school bag on his back, he headed towards another part of the city. Washington, Potomac River. The bustling commercial street next to it is exaggerated by the lively festive atmosphere, making the snow-covered woods beside the river bridge seem a bit deserted. When Sheenian came here, he couldn't help but quicken his pace when he saw the perfect figure sitting on the wooden chair by the river. "Auntie, are you back?" The woman sitting elegantly on the wooden chair turned around. Her stunningly beautiful face was cold and soft, and her jewel-like clear eyes reflected the young man's figure. Sheenian's heart beat violently, and he nodded with a smile. "I'm back, I kept you waiting for a long time." The two of them had no agreement or contact, but came here in perfect agreement. After all, this is where they first met, on Christmas Eve 16 years ago. 16 years ago today, a demigod who is completely disappointed with the human world, and the other is a reincarnation who has just come to this world. The two lonely people have become family members who will spend time together in the future. "Sit down and talk." Diana blinked. Sheenian put down his school bag and was about to sit down on the wooden chair next to his aunt. The aunt suddenly moved forward and opened her hands. "The chairs outside are cold. Treat me as a child again." Although Sheenian said so, his body was still very honest, sitting on those slender and elastic legs. "Who can resist the real fragrance mode?" Diana asked softly. "That black kitten that appeared in New York, was it you?" "Yes." Sheenian nodded and explained in detail the accidental encounter with the symbiote venom and the 3-in-1 body caused by it, as well as the hunting and killing of the symbiote. "So that's it." Diana thought thoughtfully, looking at Xiao Huang who was still sleeping in his school bag, and thought, if you don't easily enter that kind of uncontrollable state again in the future. "I know." Sheenian believed deeply. The complex thoughts and extreme temperament that appeared under the 3-in-1 body were far more twisted and terrifying than when the venom was parasitic alone. But this would also mean that he would not be able to borrow the power of the resurrected symbiote venom in the future. After all, once he is possessed by venom, he can only be forced into a 3-in-1 mode. Until this problem is not resolved, Sheenian can no longer coexist with venom. And now, the venom is parasitic on the body of the element-devouring beast. Although it is in a dormant state, the fluids between them may already be flowing. This also means that Sheenian is also unable to borrow the physical ability of the yuan-devouring beast through the familiar master. "I have an idea." My aunt's voice suddenly came from behind my ears. "What do you think?" Sheenian asked. "Come home with me," said Diana. "Auntie, what are you talking about?" "Of course I can only go home with you." Sheenian didn't know why. "Where else can I go for Christmas?" "I'm not talking about my home here in Washington." Diana took a breath and said seriously, "Come back to my hometown with me." Home. Sheenian was stunned. Aunt Diana's hometown. Sheenian had heard about it that night in the bathtub. It's not as simple as New York, a metropolis, or a specific city or town, but the place left by the old gods called Paradise Island, inhabited by the Amazons, a fighting nation inherited from the age of the gods. Through the fabric, you can feel the delicacy and flexibility of the long legs you are sitting on. Sheenian said with some confusion. "Auntie, didn't you say before that you were exiled from Paradise Island?" Paradise Island. Created by Zeus, king of the Olympian gods, the island is protected by a magical protective force field. Not only are human high-tech equipment unable to detect the existence of the island from the outside, but the correct landmarks of the island will be forgotten once you leave the interior of the island. Because of this, Paradise Island is a real existence on the Earth, but it is truly isolated from the human world. Aunt Diana forgot the coordinates of the island when she left Paradise Island in World War I. It was equivalent to being eternally exiled and unable to return to her hometown. "That's true." Diana nodded slightly, her beautiful eyes shining with wisdom. But, not long ago, because of your help, I thought of a way to return to Paradise Island. My help? Shinian was even more confused. When had he ever helped his aunt? Diana whispered. It's not important to find a way to return to Paradise Island. What's important is, are you willing to go back with me? This moment, on the other side of the river, the scene of modern streets became more and more lively, and the night wind blew through a very thin layer of floating ice on the river. Shinian suddenly realized that this was also a choice. Should I choose life, identity, and everything in the past 16 years in the human world, or should I choose to follow my aunt? Do you still need to hesitate? Shinian smiled. I do. Diana asked with some doubts. Even if you can never see your friend again. That is naturally a very sad thing. Shinian paused and said sincerely, but if I never see my aunt again, I will die. Since ancient times, many heroes have died under their skirts. What's more, he is not a hero, and he is sitting on the skirt. Okay, you want to stay on Paradise Island for a long time, but my mother still doesn't agree. Diana tapped the back of Xinyan's head with her finger and said with a smile, I haven't seen my tribe members for a long time, I just went back. Let's come back together before your vacation is over. Then when will we set off? Xinyan asked curiously. Isn't this equivalent to a few-day trip to Paradise Island? No, it feels more like going back to your parents' home with your aunt. Xinyan thought. Diana didn't have as many thoughts as he did, and her lips parted lightly. Now, set off immediately. The next day, morning. A huge 3-story sightseeing cruise ship in the Aegean Sea. Due to the local Mediterranean climate in Greece, it is not cold in winter. Bathed in the bright sunshine, tourists on the ship boarded the open-air deck one after another, enjoying the cool sea breeze and the romance of the ocean scenery. Tourists from all over the world seemed to be looking forward to a wonderful affair while having fun and relaxing. The men dress up as elegant British gentlemen, and the women mostly wear gorgeous and graceful long skirts. Many people were enjoying the sea view on the deck while chatting and socializing. And when a woman boarded the deck of the cruise ship, all the men's eyes were filled with surprise, and the women who were competing with each other on the scene were eclipsed. The black-haired woman was wearing a white dress with slit shoulders and slits. Her delicate and beautiful face was as if shaped by the gods herself. Her tall, mature and perfect body was outlined in 12 graceful and moving curves under the long dress. Her every move was noble and elegant, and her slightly curly shawl hair was shining. Next to the woman, followed closely by a young boy with a youthful face, a handsome face, and wearing a tight-fitting shirt and uniform. The two walked side by side from the cabin to the deck, like a pair of siblings with an age difference of about 10 years. Immediately, there was a gentleman on the deck who took the lead to step forward, approached the woman, and said politely and warmly, "Madam, would you be honored to meet you?" Without waiting for the mature and stunning woman to respond, the boy next to him suddenly seemed to declare his sovereignty. He put his hands around the slender waist and said with the same polite smile, "Sorry, this is my little girlfriend." Girlfriend. At this moment, many people on the deck were shocked, and for a moment they suspected that they had heard wrongly. The gentleman who took off his hat to chat was also a little dumbfounded and looked at the woman subconsciously. Diana said nothing, with a slight smile on her lips, acknowledging this identity as if she acquiesced. Xinyan blinked and said, "Uncle, could you please make way for me?" "Me, uncle." The corner of the gentleman's mouth twitched, and he stepped aside dejectedly after receiving some kind of fatal blow. When the other gentlemen saw this, they did not go over to strike up a conversation, but they suddenly felt that the lady hanging around them was not attractive. He has reached the peak of human beings at a young age and drives a top-notch car. There is really no comparison between others. Xinyan held Diana in one hand and came to the deck railing. What came into view was the vast blue sea. Diana glanced at Xinyan and suddenly said, "Just now, what did you say I was to you?" "Shao." Xinyan opened his mouth, and then said decisively, "Auntie." Seriously. Diana's face was expressionless. "Certainly. Hurry up and let go of your hands." "Oh." Xinyan took his hand back awkwardly, looking a little aggrieved. Diana seemed to feel that her tone was a little too harsh, and couldn't help but whispered, "Don't hug me like this outside." Xinyan's heart jumped inexplicably. This means that you can hug me at home if you don't hug me outside. Top understanding. If I want to hug you tonight. Xinyan couldn't help but speak, thinking that he still needed to get his aunt's approval. Diana turned her face away and looked at the sea in front of her seriously, as if she didn't hear what he said. It seems that there is no hope. Xinyan didn't feel much pity in his heart. If he really let him hug her, he would be the one who felt uncomfortable in the end. Diana suddenly said, I remember some of the location of Paradise Island. That's great, think about it carefully. Xinyan's eyes lit up, he stopped talking, and asked his aunt to concentrate. If you have divine power, you will definitely see it. At this time, Diana's right hand has been holding the golden lasso. The other side of the lasso is tied to her left wrist. The golden lasso is used to bind others and make them tell the truth. There is also a hidden rule in this. Even if it is something deep in the memory that one has forgotten, one will be forced to remember it. Because of the inspiration she got when she bound Xinyan last time, Diana now uses the truth lasso on herself, borrowing the power of the artifact to fight against the laws of Paradise Island, so as to remind herself of the correct coordinates of Paradise Island. I remembered. Diana suddenly opened her beautiful eyes and reminded inexplicably, Xinyan, get ready. Prepare. Prepare for what? Xinyan turned his head and glanced at his aunt, and found that the white dress with slit shoulders and slits that her aunt was wearing had transformed into the red armored dress she wore when armed. She also carried a war shield and a silver sword weapon on her back, which she wore on her forehead and wrists. The crown and bracelets sparkled dazzlingly in the sunlight. Auntie, you're like this. Xinyan turned around in surprise, and his hurried voice quickly stopped. I saw many tourists on the deck still watching and socializing, and no one cast a glance at Aunt Diana in disguise, as if they no longer existed on the deck in the eyes of others. Don't worry, they can't see it, Diana said, and at the same time, she reached out and picked up Xinyan. She held the golden lasso in her right hand and raised it up. She squatted down slightly in a posture of accumulating power. Xinyan realized what his aunt was going to do and couldn't help shouting, wait a minute. I'm not ready yet. Before Xinyan finished speaking, Diana had already taken off vigorously and moved forward dozens of meters beyond the cruise ship. Just as the two were about to land on the sea, Diana swung the golden rope forward, caught the surging waves in the distance, pulled with force, and once again leapt high into the sea ahead. It looks like it is speeding on the sea, with violent ripples flying all the way. Look, what is that? The tourists on the deck looked at the sea in front of the cruise ship. They could only see a straight white track, mistakenly thinking it was a marine creature similar to tuna, and watched the whitewater arrow quickly disappear at the end of the Aegean Sea. Diana was like a human-shaped fighter jet diving at low altitude on the sea. Xinyan, who was in her arms, took out a pair of wind protection glasses from his pocket and put them on. Only then was he able to open his eyes under the oncoming strong hurricane. It can be seen that the sea is constantly retreating to both sides of the body, soon leaving the yacht far behind, and finally disappearing. Above the vast sea, only Diana and Xinyan were swooping and flying. That's all. I don't know whether I have advanced 10 kilometers or hundreds of kilometers toward a certain place. Intel. With a boo sound, Diana led Xinyan through an invisible barrier. Xinyan opened his eyes wide. What was originally an endless deep blue sea suddenly turned into a blue sea with clear and slightly shallow water. Among the large rock formations guarded by soldiers, the majestic archipelago sits in the deepest part of this sea. The largest and most central island among them is surrounded by golden quicksand-like beaches, surrounded by steep mountains. On the peaks and cliffs are numerous white temples and sanctuaries built in the ancient Greek style. The large waterfall is like a crown on the top of the mountains, falling down vigorously, forming an extremely dazzling rainbow halo. Aunt Diana didn't need to explain. Xinyan knew it after just one glance. This is the place left by the old Olympic gods, a dream paradise island isolated from human beings and without worldly disputes. Paradise Island. Paradise Island touches the beach outside the sea. A group of wild female warriors wearing leather suits and armors with ancient Greek characteristics, holding bows, arrows, metal spears and other cold weapons, looked at the unknown existence forming a trajectory of water arrows approaching at high speed in the offshore sea, and raised their arms in preparation. The shield, holding the big bow, points the cold and sharp spear tip and sword tip outward at the same time. The leading female general is sitting on the back of a strong black horse, holding a silver sword in her hand. Her face is determined and cold, her exposed muscles are bronze, and she has a domineering and murderous aura that far exceeds that of most men. Just as the Amazons prepare to attack the intruders, the female general looked at the intruders who were getting closer and closer. Suddenly she was shocked and shouted, "Everyone, put down your weapons." "General, this." The female warriors didn't know why, but they still obeyed the instructions and put away their weapons. Tap. An intruder, no, it should be two intruders, arrived at the beach of Paradise Island from the outside sea at extremely fast speeds. Looking at the woman wearing a battle uniform wearing the unique crown of the Amazon royal family, the Amazon female warriors on the field were stunned. Then they collectively put their hands on their chests with great excitement and knelt down on one knee to show their loyalty. Support. "Your Highness the Princess, Your Highness Diana, is that you?" The female general got off the black horse, her whole body trembling, and said in disbelief. Diana put down Xinian in her arms and stepped forward quickly, unable to hide her joy. "Yes, Antiope, Aunt. I'm back." The two hugged each other tightly. Xinian had a smile on his face and stayed aside very wisely, not disturbing the reunion between his aunt and her relatives. Antiope's originally stern face was full of smiles. He patted Diana on the back and said excitedly, Okay, just come back. Your mother and I, and all the people in the Amazon, have been looking forward to waiting for you. Return." "Mother, is she okay?" Diana asked softly. "That's very good, but I still care about you very much." Antiope smiled and urged, "Hurry up and go back to the palace with me, so that your mother and the clan can take a look at you." "Antiope, wait a moment." Diana shook her head. At this time, the Amazons on the field had all focused their attention on Xinian behind Diana. Many female warriors subconsciously showed sharp eyes of rejection and hostility. "Your Highness Diana." Antiope looked at Xinian who was nearby, and his face returned to its previous seriousness and indifference. "You should know that outsiders are not allowed to set foot on Paradise Island. What's more, it's a male human being." Antiope said to Xinian again, "Who are you?" I am." Xinian hesitated. Facing the female general Antiope and a group of fierce and cold Amazon female warriors, he suddenly didn't know how to describe his identity. The most appropriate one should be Diana's adopted son. In fact, Xinian has always instinctively rejected the identity of an adopted son, so he has called Diana his aunt since she was a child, and Diana tacitly agreed to this title. However, if you don't use your identity as an adopted son or claim to be a relative of Diana, it will obviously be difficult for the Amazons to get through this. Just when Xinian was hesitant, Diana stepped forward. Diana didn't say any words of explanation, her stunningly beautiful face remained calm. She stood close in front of Xinian, suddenly raised her hands, and took off the crown that symbolized her status. "Your Highness Diana, what do you want to do?" Antiope seemed to realize something and couldn't help but exclaimed in surprise. Ignoring Antiope's obstructive words, Diana smiled slightly, and put her silver crown on Xinian's head under the shocked eyes of the Amazon female warrior. Xinian blinked, unable to understand what this meant. On the beach of Paradise Island, General Antiope and the Amazon warriors were shocked, puzzled, or angry, and fell into silence. There was no need for too much explanation. When Amazon Princess Diana put her artifact starlight crown on the head of a human male, she had already made her position clear. "His name is Xinian Prince," Diana said softly, as if announcing something. "Ah, good afternoon, the weather is really good today. Well, it's nice to meet you all." In order to avoid a dull moment, Xinian, wearing a crown, took the initiative to wave and greeted the female warriors enthusiastically. However, no one responded to his words, and the scene became even quieter. Xinian stopped waving his hand, and his scalp tingled. He felt that this was really embarrassing to open the door to embarrassing. It was embarrassing. Even so, without the Queen's order, he can't enter the main island of Paradise Island. Antiope's chest was heaving, and he clenched his fists, looking at Xinian with extremely cold eyes. Xinian suddenly felt that this look was familiar. Well, it was very similar to the look that Officer George often gave him. "I know, I'm going to meet my mother right now. Diana nodded and said, Antiope, can you please arrange a place for Xinyan in the archipelago building next to the main island? He will stay here for a few days. No problem. Facing Diana's request, Antiope finally gritted his teeth and agreed no matter how reluctant he was. Xinyan. Diana turned back and said softly to Xinyan, you follow my aunt, Antiope, to the arranged residence first. I will come to see you later after meeting my mother. Okay, go ahead. Xinyan agreed, thinking that it was nothing to come to a tourist island with poor tourist services. Come with me. Antiope looked at him expressionlessly, turned over and rode on the black horse. Far away from the royal palace and the residence of the Amazon residents, Paradise Island is on the cliff side facing the open sea. There is a huge and peculiar ancient round building here. Antiope brought Xinyan to the main entrance of the ancient building. Looking at the complete building that looked like the remains of an ancient temple, Xinyan said in doubt, is this a place for me to live? In fact, it doesn't have to be so good. Antiope, who was riding a black horse in front, ignored it and came to the door of the ancient building by himself. He said to the female guards in silver armor on both sides of the door, arrange a spare guard room for him. Yes, General. The two female guards in front of the door quickly received the order. They looked at the first human boy who came here curiously, and when they saw the familiar crown on the boy's head, they immediately showed the same shocked expression as the female warrior before. Why, look at me like this again? Xinyan muttered in his heart, completely not understanding the meaning of the crown on his head. Keep an eye on him, don't let him walk around. Antiope threw this sentence to the female guard, and then left Xinyan alone at the door of the ancient building, and rode away on a black horse, without facing or speaking to Xinyan. After Antiope left in a swift and decisive manner, one of the female guards respectfully said to Xinyan, Your Highness, please follow me in. Your Highness. Xinyan was stunned for a moment, looking at the female guard who walked into the ancient building, and suddenly felt that the people here were still very polite. Xinyan followed the female guard into the door, and the further he went into the building, the more he felt something was wrong. The inner wall of this ancient building is unimaginably thick, with no doors or windows, and the only main door is just a crowded corridor 2 meters high. Rather than being a residence, it is more like a secret place to imprison prisoners or store items. This is it. The female guard led Xinyan to the side of the corridor instead of the center of the building. As she pushed on the brick, a secret door hidden in the wall slowly opened, and countless loose dust fell down. Ahem. The female guard and Xinyan coughed for a while, and when the dust cleared, a blue hanging lamp on the high wall of the inner room behind the secret door automatically lit up. Looking inside along the light, you can see that it is a small square room of less than 20 square meters. The room displays a weapon rack and 2 very simple beds. Apart from that, there is nothing else. Xinyan's mouth twitched slightly. It's okay for a small dark room, but the weapon rack and the bed are covered with thick dust. I don't know how long it has been since anyone has lived there. Your Highness, please wait a moment. I'll help you clean it. The female guard waved the dust in the room and said apologetically, this room was prepared for the guards who were on duty here late at night when this building was designed. But later, most of the guards stationed here withdrew, so it has been vacant and not cleaned. Guard? What do you mean by guard? Xinyan was a little confused. Wouldn't they set up a detention center for him to live in? Or maybe they just treated him like a criminal and locked him up like a criminal. It's just an item, the female guard said as she cleaned up. That thing is in the deepest part of this building, but there's nothing to see. I guarded it for about 10 years, and before me, our Amazon people had been guarding it for thousands of years. Can you let me live in such an important place? Xinyan became more and more panicked. He needed guards to guard it closely for thousands of years. No one would believe that there was no problem here. Nothing. As long as it doesn't leave here, it's fine. For thousands of years, it hasn't shown any abnormalities, so don't worry. The female guard shrugged and said, What's more, you are the monarch of that one, and it's a concession for you to live here with such a noble status. Wait, Xinyan raised his eyebrows. Monarch, what do you mean? The female guard was also confused and pointed to the crown he was wearing. Isn't that Princess Diana? That's right. Xinyan nodded. That's right. After confirming, the female guard said in a deep voice, We Amazons are equipped with a crown from the moment we are born. The royal family has a crown, and the warriors have a crown of armor. This is a symbol of our identity and honor throughout our lives. Then this crown is on my head now. Xi Nian opened his eyes belatedly. It means that she has given you her honor, identity, and everything of the most valuable. You are her monarch. We share honor and disgrace, and advance and retreat on the same stand. At this point, the female guard sighed, and her eyes looked at Xi Nian through the gap in the iron helmet. I don't know why that prince would choose you, a human, as her other half. Of course, this is not something I can evaluate. I can only respect her choice. Xi Nian was silent. He was not surprised, but felt that the crown on his head was heavy and suffocating. Aunt Diana would never choose him as her other half. This is probably like before, when he deliberately called Aunt Diana his girlfriend to deal with the flirting. It was just to give him a more reasonable identity to stay in Paradise Island. But a woman as independent, intellectual, beautiful, powerful, and perfect as Aunt Diana made a proud and noble god like her, like an accessory, declare that everything she represents is placed on him. The price of this is not worth it for even Xi Nian for Aunt Diana. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.